The Stepson's Ledger. Welcome to FW. Let us begin. Chapter 1. The knife went in at 11:47 p.m. I remember the exact time because the clock on the wall, the one my father bought when he still loved my mother, before the cancer took her, before he brought them home, that clock was the last thing I saw before the world went red. Tick, tock, then steel, then nothing. My stepbrother Marcus was drunk, not the funny kind of drunk, the cruel kind. The kind that made him remember every time I scored higher on a test, every time our father praised my work ethic, every time the old man looked at me, his real son, with something like pride. Marcus couldn't stand it. He was the golden boy, the one with the expensive tutors, the private school, the car at 16. I was the servant, the one who cooked, cleaned, ironed his shirts, stayed up until 2 a.m. finishing his homework assignments because Marcus has a social life, Ethan. You're just useful, that's what my stepmother called me. Useful like a tool, like a sponge. And at 11:47 p.m. on the night of my 26th birthday, a birthday no one remembered, not even me until I saw the date on my phone while mopping the kitchen floor, Marcus decided he'd had enough of my usefulness. He came home from the club. I was on my knees scrubbing wine stains from the marble tiles he'd tracked in. He stood over me. I didn't look up. I never looked up, that was the rule. When Marcus entered a room, you kept your eyes down, you kept your voice soft, you kept your existence small. You know what Dad said today? His voice slurred, but the malice was sharp, crystal clear. He said, "You're better than me, at everything. Can you believe that? My own father said the servant boy is better than his real son." I kept scrubbing. The sponge made a sound like wet flesh against stone. I should have run, I know that now. I should have gotten up, walked out the door, kept walking until the city ended and the fields began. But I didn't, because I was useful. Because useful things don't run. They stay, they endure. They hope that someday, somehow, the people who use them will look down and see a human being. "Look at me," Marcus said. I didn't. He kicked the bucket. Dirty water splashed across my face, my chest, the floor I'd been cleaning for 3 hours. I was soaked, freezing. Tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. "Not even worth the water," he whispered. Then the knife, not a kitchen knife, something fancier, something he'd probably bought to impress someone at the club. It caught the light from the chandelier I'd polished that morning on my knees with a toothbrush because my stepmother said the regular cloth left streaks. The first cut was across my shoulder. I felt it more than I saw it, a cold line, then heat, then wet. I opened my mouth to scream, but Marcus clamped his hand over my face. He smelled like whiskey and expensive cologne and the particular rot of someone who has never been told no. "SHH," he said. "You'll wake mother." Mother, not his mother, not my mother. Mother, the woman who'd married my father 6 months after my real mother died. The woman who'd looked at me 8 years old, grieving, confused, and said, "You'll earn your keep, Ethan. We don't keep pets in this house." I tried to fight, I really did, but I was tired. I was so tired. 10 years of scrubbing, cooking, apologizing, disappearing. My body had nothing left, my spirit had nothing left. When Marcus raised the knife again, I didn't even raise my arms to block it. I just thought, I hope I don't make a mess. She'll make me clean it up. Even dead, I'll be useful. The second cut went deeper. The clock ticked, the world went red. Then black. I woke up screaming. That's the first thing I remember. The screaming, my own voice, raw, tearing out of my throat like something alive and desperate. I was sitting up in bed, hands clutching my chest, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I was breathing. I was breathing. The air tasted like dust and old wood and the particular smell of the guest room, the room they'd given me when I turned 16, the room with the broken heater and the window that didn't close properly, the room directly above the garage where I could hear Marcus's sports car purring at 2 a.m. when he brought girls home. I knew this room. I hated this room, but I was alive. I looked down at my hands. Small, smooth, no calluses from 10 years of scrubbing floors. No scar across my palm from the time I burned myself cooking Marcus's birthday dinner and my stepmother told me to finish the sauce first, then deal with it. I threw off the blanket and ran to the mirror. The face staring back at me was 16 years old. 16, I touched my cheek. The skin was soft, unlined. The dark circles under my eyes, permanent fixtures by age 20, were gone. My hair was longer, shaggier, the way I wore it before I learned to keep it short and neat because long hair makes you look lazy, Ethan. I was 16. I was 16. I stood there for I don't know how long, minutes, hours, maybe days in that strange stretched time of shock, just staring at the boy in the mirror. The boy who didn't know yet. The boy who still thought, somewhere deep down, that if he just worked hard enough, smiled politely enough, became invisible enough, they would eventually love him. Or at least stop hurting him. I wanted to warn him. I wanted to grab his shoulders and shake him and scream, "Run, run now, don't wait, don't hope, they will never love you. They will use you until you're empty and then they will throw you away like a broken tool." Run, but I couldn't because I was him. And because as the shock faded and something colder, harder, sharper took its place, I remembered everything, every conversation, every cruelty. Every moment of my stepmother's fake smile, Marcus's casual violence, my father's slow withdrawal into work and whiskey until he stopped seeing me at all. I remembered the will, the one my stepmother convinced him to change when I was 18, the one that left everything to Marcus and her. I remembered the college acceptance letter I'd hidden under my mattress because showing it would mean thinking you're better than your brother Ethan. How selfish. I remembered the knife. I remembered the clock. Tick, tock. 11:47 p.m. I remembered dying. And now, standing in this freezing room with my 16-year-old face and my 26-year-old memories, I felt something I hadn't felt in 10 years. Not fear, not hope, rage, but not the hot kind. Not Marcus's drunk, sloppy rage. This was cold, calculated, patient, the kind of rage that plans, the kind that waits. The kind that opens a small leather notebook, the one I'd bought with birthday money from my mother's sister, the only person who remembered I existed, and begins to write. I found the notebook under my mattress, right where I'd left it. The pages were blank except for the first line. Written in my 16-year-old handwriting, shaky and hopeful. Today I start my journal. Maybe someday someone will read this and know I was here. I tore out that page and I wrote a new first line in the handwriting of a man who had died and been reborn. The ledger of debts, every cruelty, every lie, every drop of blood. I remember all of it and I will make them pay. Not with violence, with justice, with patience, with the one thing they never expected from the servant boy. I paused. Added intelligence. The door opened without a knock. It never did. Privacy was a privilege, and privileges were for family. I was not family. I was useful. My stepmother stood in the doorway, already dressed in her silk robe, her blonde hair perfectly styled even at 6:30 a.m. She was 43, beautiful in the way of expensive maintenance and cold eyes. She looked at me, at my rumpled clothes, my pale face, my hands still shaking from the memory of death, and she smiled. Not a warm smile, the other kind, the kind that didn't reach her eyes, the kind that calculated and assessed and found me lacking. Ethan, she said, you're awake early. Good, Marcus has a chemistry test today. You'll need to make his breakfast, eggs Benedict, the way he likes, and don't forget the hollandaise sauce. You ruined it last time. He was very disappointed. She said it like I was a disappointing appliance, a blender that didn't blend properly, a vacuum that missed spots. I looked at her, I looked at the woman who in 10 years would convince my father to change his will. The woman who would watch Marcus kick me, cut me, kill me, and call it boys being boys. The woman who would inherit my father's company, his house, his life, while my body was buried in an unmarked grave because we don't want scandal. Ethan, even in death you should be useful. Looked at her, and I smiled, the same smile, the one that didn't reach my eyes. The one that calculated and assessed and found her lacking. Of course, mother, I said, I'll make it perfect. Marcus deserves the best. The word mother tasted like poison, like broken glass, like the blood that had filled my mouth at 11:47 p.m. on a night that hadn't happened yet, but I said it perfectly. Sweetly, obediently, she didn't notice the difference. Why would she? I was useful. I was predictable. I was the servant boy who knew his place. She turned and walked away, her silk robe whispering against the doorframe. I waited until her footsteps faded down the stairs, then I opened my notebook and wrote, Entry 1, Stepmother, the hollandaise sauce, August 14, 2016. She will use this moment, this failure, to remind father that I am ungrateful and careless. She will suggest that Marcus needs a tutor. The tutor will cost 400 hour. The tutor will be her lover's son. This is the beginning of the embezzlement. I know this because I found the receipts in 2021, in the locked drawer she thought I didn't know about. I know the combination. 12/26/09, her birthday, she's that predictable. I closed the notebook. I looked at the mirror one more time. The boy looked back at me, 16, scared, exhausted, but with something new in his eyes. Something that hadn't been there before, patience. I had 10 years to watch them, to learn them. To become the perfect, obedient, invisible servant they expected. And then piece by piece to take everything, not with a knife. Not with Marcus's sloppy, drunken violence, with the ledger, with memory, with the terrible, beautiful, patient intelligence of a man who had already died once, and had nothing left to lose. I made the eggs Benedict perfectly. The hollandaise was smooth as silk, golden as sunlight, rich as the life I should have had. Marcus ate it without looking at me. My stepmother praised his appetite for success. My father, already thinning, already drinking, already disappearing, grunted approval and left for work without meeting my eyes. I watched them all, I smiled, and I wrote in my notebook under the table where no one could see, the game begins, and they don't even know they're playing. Chapter 2, the chemistry test, was on a Tuesday. I knew this because I'd already lived through it once, the first time, at 16, trembling at my desk while Marcus copied answers from my paper and my stepmother smiled from the doorway like she'd orchestrated the whole thing, because she had. She'd bribed the proctor. She'd threatened my teacher. She'd made sure her golden boy would pass no matter how little he knew, while I would sit there, silent and invisible, my perfect score attributed to cheating, because the servant boy couldn't possibly be smarter than his brother. That was the first time, this was the second. And this time I was the one who'd orchestrated everything. Marcus stumbled into the kitchen at 7:15 a.m., exactly 17 minutes later than usual. His eyes were red-rimmed, his skin pale and clammy, his expensive silk pajama shirt stained with something that looked like wine but smelled like vomit. He'd been out until 3 a.m., I knew because I'd heard his car, heard him cursing at the gate, heard my stepmother's whispered scolding through the walls. The same conversation, word for word, that I'd heard 10 years ago. Keep your voice down, the servants. Ethan's not a servant, mother, he's furniture. Even furniture has ears, Marcus. Be careful. I'd lain in my freezing bed, eyes open, notebook pressed against my chest, and I'd written it down. Every word, every inflection. Every drop of contempt that pooled on the floor like spilled wine. Now, watching Marcus grip the counter for balance, I felt that cold thing in my chest again. Not rage. Rage was too hot, too messy, too Marcus. This was something else, something that watched, something that waited. Something that had already buried them in a grave of their own making, and was simply waiting for them to fall in. Late, my stepmother said, not looking up from her tablet. She was reviewing stock portfolios, or pretending to. In 6 years, I would learn that most of her financial acumen was actually my father's accountant doing the work while she took credit. But that morning, at 7:15 a.m. on the first Tuesday of September, she was still the image of perfect motherhood. Concerned but not hovering, present but not intrusive, the kind of mother who made other mothers feel inadequate. Feeling sick, Marcus groaned, pressing his forehead against the marble counter. The same counter I'd scrubbed at midnight. The same counter where in another life I'd died. Feel better after breakfast, she said, still not looking up. Ethan made your favorite, the eggs, the way you like them. She said it like she'd cooked them herself. Like she'd stood at the stove for 40 minutes, whisking butter into egg yolks, adjusting the heat, watching the sauce thicken to exactly the right consistency. She'd never cooked a meal in her life, but in her mind, in the story she told herself and the world, she was the architect of every perfect moment in this house. I was the invisible hand, the ghost in the kitchen. I was fine with that, because ghosts see everything. Ghosts remember everything. And ghosts, when they come back with a ledger, are the most dangerous things in the world. Here, Marcus, I said, setting the plate in front of him. Perfect eggs Benedict, perfect hollandaise, perfect presentation, the kind that would have earned me a scholarship to culinary school if I'd been allowed to apply, if my father had signed the forms, if my stepmother hadn't burned them and told me cooking is for servants. Ethan, you're already good enough at that. Marcus didn't look at the plate. He didn't look at me, he never did. I was a function, a process, a thing that produced food and disappeared. But my stepmother looked. She looked because she noticed. She always noticed. Not the good things, never the good things, but the anomalies, the deviations. The moments when the servant boy stepped out of his assigned role, and I had stepped out just slightly, just enough. The eggs were too perfect, the hollandaise too smooth. Plate arranged too carefully, with a sprig of parsley that I knew was her favorite garnish, the one she always requested at restaurants but never admitted to liking because it was common. She noticed, her eyes narrowed just slightly. The tablet lowered just an inch. Ethan, she said, and her voice was different now. Not the usual dismissive tone, something sharper, something that probed. You've been attentive lately. Is there something you need? It was a test. I recognized it immediately. She'd used it before in the first life when I was 13, and she'd caught me reading a book on contract law in the library. Is there something you need, Ethan? Like I was a stray dog scratching at the door. Like needing something was a weakness she could exploit. Last time I'd stammered. I'd apologized. I'd hidden the book and never touched it again. This time I smiled. The same smile she'd used on me. The one that didn't reach my eyes. The one that said, I see you, I understand you, and I am not afraid of you. Nothing, mother, I said, keeping my voice soft, my eyes downcast, my posture slightly hunched, the perfect picture of servitude. I just want Marcus to do well on his test. He's been working so hard. The lie was beautiful. It was poetry. It was a knife wrapped in silk. Marcus hadn't worked hard. He'd never worked hard. He'd been handed everything, grades, opportunities, forgiveness, and he'd squandered all of it because he'd never learned that things have value. To him, the world was a vending machine that dispensed whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, and someone else always paid. My stepmother studied me for a long moment. I could see her calculating, assessing, trying to find the angle, because there was always an angle. In her world, no one did anything without wanting something in return. Kindness was currency. Attention was debt. Every interaction was a transaction. She couldn't see my angle, because my angle was 10 years deep, because my angle was written in blood in a notebook under my mattress, because my angle was revenge, and revenge was the one currency she didn't understand. That's sweet, she said finally, and the word tasted like poison. Marcus, eat your breakfast. Your tutor arrives at 9. Tutor, I kept my face blank, my hands steady. But inside, something cold and satisfied uncoiled. The tutor, his name was Julian Vance. I knew this because I'd found his name on receipts in 2021, in the locked drawer with the combination 122609. I'd found his father's name too, Reginald Vance, financial advisor, convicted of embezzlement in 2022, sentenced to 8 years in prison. The man who'd helped my stepmother siphon nearly $2 million from my father's company before anyone noticed. Julian was 22, handsome in a soft, forgettable way, expensive glasses, cheap shoes. The particular arrogance of someone who'd been told he was smart without ever being challenged. He'd graduated from a mediocre university with mediocre grades, but his father had connections, and my stepmother had needs, and so Julian Vance became Marcus's chemistry tutor at $400 per hour. In the first life, I'd hated him. He'd looked at me the same way everyone did, like furniture, like a servant, like a thing. He'd eaten my food, used my bathroom, tracked mud on my floors, and never once said thank you. He'd helped Marcus cheat on tests, write college essays, apply for internships he didn't deserve. He was part of the machine, the system, the great grinding wheel that crushed people like me into dust. In this life, I was going to use him. Julian arrived at 8:47 a.m., 13 minutes early, because he was eager, because he needed this job, because his father's connections were already fraying and the Vance family was one scandal away from ruin. I knew this because I'd read the news. In 2022, while I was dying, I opened the door before he could knock. "Mr. Vance," I said, keeping my voice neutral, my eyes appropriately downcast. "Marcus is in the study." "I'll bring coffee." He barely looked at me. A nod, a murmur, the same dismissal I'd received 10,000 times, but as he passed I noticed something, a detail, a crack in the armor. His left hand was shaking, not much, just slightly. The tremor of someone who hadn't slept, who was drinking too much coffee, who was scared of something. I filed it away. In the ledger, in the endless, patient memory of a man who had died and been reborn, entry 2, Julian Vance, shaking left hand. August 14, 2016. Possible pressure from father, gambling, drugs. Will investigate. The study was my father's domain, or had been before he started spending 16 hours a day at the office, before he started drinking in his car, before he stopped seeing his family and started seeing his memories. It smelled of leather and old paper and the particular dust of neglect. Marcus sat at the desk, head in his hands, looking like he wanted to die. Julian sat across from him, opening his briefcase, laying out textbooks with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this many times before. I brought the coffee. Black for Julian, because I'd noticed last time, 10 years ago, the first time, that he never added cream or sugar. Marcus didn't drink coffee. Marcus drank energy drinks and vodka, sometimes together. "Thanks," Julian said, not looking at me. I set the tray down. I turned to leave. And then, because I was a ghost, because I was invisible, because no one ever noticed the servant boy, I paused, just for a moment. Just long enough to see the papers Julian had laid out on the desk, the test, Marcus's chemistry test, the one scheduled for 2 p.m. that afternoon, the one that would determine his grade, his GPA, his college prospects, his entire future. And there in Julian's neat, precise handwriting were the answers, not all of them, just enough, the difficult ones. The ones that would raise suspicion if Marcus got them all right. The carefully calibrated cheat sheet, designed to make him look smart but not too smart, smart enough to pass. Not smart enough to stand out. I memorized them, every answer, every formula, every carefully constructed lie. Then I left in my room. I opened the notebook. Entry 3, the test. Julian has the answers. He will give Marcus approximately 60% of the correct answers, enough to pass, not enough to excel. This is their system. This is how Marcus maintains his good student image without threatening the genius narrative they've built around him. The test is at 2 p.m. I have 4 hours. I paused, then I wrote, "I will make sure Marcus gets 100%, every answer correct, perfect score, and I will make sure everyone knows he cheated." Plan was simple, elegant, invisible. I didn't need to change the test. I didn't need to bribe the teacher. I didn't need to do anything that could be traced back to me. I just needed to make sure Marcus believed he was cheating successfully, and then I needed to make sure the teacher knew the teacher's name was Mrs. Patterson. Alina Patterson, 53 years old, widowed, 2 children in college. She drove a 15-year-old Honda and lived in an apartment complex that my stepmother would have described as squalid. She'd been teaching chemistry for 27 years. She was tough, fair, and deeply suspicious of rich kids who suddenly started acing tests. In the first life, she'd accused Marcus of cheating. My stepmother had destroyed her, called the school board, threatened her job, made her life so miserable that she'd retired early, moved to a different state, and never taught again. I'd felt guilty about that, for years. I'd told myself that Mrs. Patterson was just doing her job, that she'd been right, that my stepmother was the monster, not me. I was wrong. Mrs. Patterson wasn't just doing her job. She was one of the few people in my entire life who'd looked at me and seen something human. Once in the hallway, she'd stopped me. She'd said, "Ethan, you're smarter than your brother. Don't let them convince you otherwise." I'd stared at her, terrified, and run away. I'd never spoken to her again. She was the first person who'd ever told me I had value, and my stepmother had destroyed her for it. This time I was going to save her. And I was going to use her to destroy Marcus. At 10:30 a.m. I was in the school library. Not my school, Marcus's school, the private academy that cost $40,000 per year, the one I'd never been allowed to attend because public school is good enough for you, Ethan. We need to save money for Marcus's future. Walked in like I belonged there, because I did. I was 16. I looked like a student. No one questioned me. I found the library computer. I logged into the school's internal system. The password was Panthers2022, unchanged for 4 years, something I'd discovered in 2020 when Marcus had left his laptop open and I'd copied everything. Just in case. Just because I was invisible and invisible people see things, I didn't change anything. I didn't hack anything. I just looked. The test was there, in the chemistry folder. Password protected, but the password was ChemRocks1, something Mrs. Patterson had written on a sticky note on her desk, visible to anyone who walked by. I'd seen it, in another life. At another time, I opened the test, I read every question. And then, because I was a ghost, because I was patient, because I had died and been reborn with a ledger of debts, I wrote a letter, dear Mrs. Patterson. I am writing to inform you of a matter of academic dishonesty that will occur today at 2 p.m. in your chemistry class. Marcus Whitfield will be in possession of the complete answers to your test. He will attempt to score 100%. I know this because I have seen the answers. They are currently in the possession of his tutor, Julian Vance, who will provide them to Marcus during your class. The answers are written on a sheet of paper that will be hidden in Marcus's left shoe. I am not asking you to confront him. I am not asking you to accuse him without evidence. I am simply asking you to watch, to observe, to be the excellent teacher you have always been. If I am wrong, I will never contact you again. If I am right, I hope you will remember that some of us see you, some of us value you. Some of us will not let the world destroy you for doing what is right. A student who remembers. I printed the letter at the library. I put it in an envelope. I wrote Mrs. Patterson private on the front. And then, because I was still a servant, still invisible, still bound by the rules of a game I was only beginning to learn, I slipped it into her mailbox during lunch when the teacher's lounge was empty and the hallway cameras were conveniently angled away. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. Ghosts don't sign their work at 1:45 p.m. I was in the parking lot of Marcus's school. Not inside. I didn't have a pass, didn't have a reason, didn't have any right to be there. But I was there, because I needed to see, because I needed to know. Because some part of me, the part that had died at 11:47 p.m. with a knife in my chest and a clock on the wall, needed to watch the first domino fall. Marcus walked into the building at 1:52 p.m. He was walking better now, steadier, the hangover burned off by adrenaline and fear. Julian walked beside him, carrying his briefcase, wearing his expensive glasses, his left hand still shaking slightly. They disappeared inside. I waited. At 2:47 p.m., 47 minutes into a test that should have taken 90, Marcus emerged. His face was flushed. His eyes were bright. He was grinning, the same grin he'd worn when he'd kicked the bucket of dirty water into my face, the same grin that said, I won, I always win, the world gives me everything I want. Julian walked beside him, nodding, smiling, shaking that trembling left hand. They got into Julian's car. They drove away. I stayed in the parking lot. I waited. At 3:15 p.m. Mrs. Patterson emerged. She was walking slowly, like someone in shock, like someone who'd seen a ghost. In her hand she held a piece of paper, the letter, or perhaps something else. She looked around the parking lot. She looked at the trees, the sky, the empty spaces where students had been. She didn't see me. I was invisible. I was a ghost, but she smiled. It was a small smile, a tired smile, the smile of someone who'd been fighting alone for a very long time and had just discovered she wasn't alone anymore. She got into her Honda. She drove away. I opened my notebook. Entry 4, the test. Marcus scored 100%, every answer correct. Mrs. Patterson knows. The letter worked. Phase 1 complete. I paused, then I wrote, Phase 2 begins tomorrow, because a perfect score is suspicious. Because a perfect score from a failing student is undeniable. Because my stepmother will try to destroy Mrs. Patterson just like she did before. And this time I will be ready. This time I have evidence. This time I have the ledger. I closed the book. I looked at the school building, the place I'd never been allowed to enter, the place where my brother learned to be cruel, and my father learned to be absent, and my stepmother learned to be a monster. I smiled, and I whispered to the empty parking lot, to the ghosts of my first life, to the boy who died at 11:47 p.m. with a knife in his chest and a clock on the wall. Tick-tock, mother, tick-tock. Chapter 3. The emergency board meeting was called for 9:00 a.m. on a Thursday. I knew this because I'd heard my stepmother's phone call at 6:30 a.m., her voice sharp as broken glass, slicing through the quiet house like a knife through silk. She'd been awake since 5:00, packing in her study, making calls, arranging pieces on a board she thought she controlled. She'd called 3 lawyers, 2 private investigators, 1 journalist from the local paper who owed her a favor from the charity gala where she'd accidentally let him see her cleavage while signing a 10,000 check. She was building a wall, a fortress, a narrative, and at the center of that narrative was the lie. Mrs. Patterson is a jealous, incompetent teacher who targeted my son because of his family's wealth. She fabricated evidence. She harassed him. She should be fired, blacklisted, destroyed. It was the same lie she'd told before, in my first life. The one where I died. This time I was going to help her build it. And then I was going to tear it down brick by brick. I made breakfast at 7:15 a.m. Perfect eggs, perfect toast, perfect coffee, black and bitter, the way my father used to drink it before he stopped tasting anything. I arranged everything on the tray with the precision of a surgeon, the care of a priest preparing communion, the patience of a man who had already died and was simply waiting for the world to catch up. My stepmother entered the kitchen at 7:42 a.m. She was wearing her power suit, charcoal grey, tailored to her exact measurements, the kind of suit that cost more than Mrs. Patterson's annual salary. Her hair was pulled back so tight it stretched her face into a mask of perfect composure. Her makeup was flawless. Her eyes were murder. "Ethan," she said, and her voice was different now. Not the usual dismissive tone, not the probing suspicion from yesterday, something colder. Something that used. Mother, I said, keeping my eyes down, my voice soft, my hands steady on the coffee pot. I heard you on the phone. Is everything all right? It was a risk, a small one. Servant boys don't ask questions. They don't express concern. They don't notice things, but I was 16. I was supposed to be naive, supposed to be eager. Supposed to be desperate for any crumb of maternal attention, any hint that I belonged in this family, any sign that my years of service had earned me something more than contempt. She looked at me. Really looked. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, she saw me not as furniture but as a tool that could be used. Marcus is in trouble, she said, and her voice cracked just slightly, the perfect performance of a concerned mother, the kind of crack that would play beautifully in a courtroom, in a newspaper article, in the minds of jurors who wanted to believe that wealthy women could love their children too. A teacher is accusing him of cheating. It's not true, of course. Marcus would never, but this woman, this Patterson, she has a history. Resentment, she targets successful students. She was testing the narrative, rehearsing it, using me as a mirror, a sounding board, a practice audience for the performance she would give in 3 hours. I let her see what she wanted to see. My eyes widened, my mouth opened slightly. My hands trembled just enough, just the right amount of shocked innocence. Marcus, I whispered. But he's always so careful. He would never cheat. He doesn't need to. He's brilliant. The lie was exquisite. It was a sonnet. It was a symphony of false sincerity, and she bought it completely, because it was exactly what she wanted to hear. Because it confirmed her worldview that Marcus was perfect, that his success was real, that anyone who questioned it was motivated by envy. Exactly, she said, and her voice hardened. Exactly, but we need to protect him. We need to make sure the truth comes out, the real truth. She was telling me her plan, not because she trusted me. Because I was invisible, because I was furniture. Because furniture doesn't remember, doesn't judge, doesn't betray, she was wrong. Mother, I said, and I let my voice crack, let my eyes fill with tears, real tears, because I was thinking of Mrs. Patterson, of her Honda, of her small smile in the parking lot, of the way she'd been destroyed in my first life for doing what was right. Is there anything I can do? I know I'm not important, but I want to help. I want to help Marcus. It was the perfect offer, the perfect trap, the perfect piece of bait dangled in front of a woman who had never met sincerity she couldn't exploit. She looked at me for a long moment, calculating, assessing, finding the angle, and then she smiled. Actually, Ethan, she said, and her voice was honey now, warm and sweet and deadly. There is something you can do. The school board meeting is at 9. I need someone to sit in the audience, someone, unobtrusive, someone who can listen. Who can watch, who can tell me what Mrs. Patterson says, what her body language reveals, what weaknesses we can exploit. She paused. Can you do that? Can you be my eyes and ears? She was offering me a gift, the gift of inclusion, the gift of purpose, the gift of being useful in a new way, a way that made me feel important, needed, almost like family. In my first life, I would have wept with gratitude. I would have promised her anything. I would have sold my soul for that smile. In this life, I smiled back. Of course, Mother, I said. I'll do anything for this family, anything, including burning it to the ground. The school boardroom smelled of old wood and older politics. The chairs were leather, cracked with age, the kind of chairs that had supported the weight of 1,000 decisions, 1,000 compromises, 1,000 quiet betrayals. The walls were lined with portraits of former board members, stern men in stern suits, their painted eyes following every movement with the judgment of the dead. I sat in the back row, the last seat, the one closest to the door, the one in the shadows, the one where no one looked because no one expected anyone to be there. I was invisible. I was furniture. I was a ghost, and I had my notebook. Mrs. Patterson sat at the center table. She was wearing her best dress, navy blue modest, the kind of dress that said, I am professional, I am respectable, I have nothing to hide. Her hands were folded in her lap, her back was straight. Her eyes were tired but clear. She looked like a woman who had already decided to die on this hill. My stepmother sat across from her, flanked by lawyers, supported by my father, who had actually come, who had left his office, who had put down his whiskey long enough to attend, which meant he was either very concerned or very drunk. Probably both. Marcus sat beside him. Perfect posture, perfect suit. Perfect expression of wounded innocence, the kind of expression that had been practiced in front of mirrors, coached by lawyers. Refined by a mother who understood that victimhood was the most powerful weapon in any wealthy arsenal. The board members filed in. 7 of them. Local dignitaries, business owners, a doctor, a lawyer, a woman who ran the local animal shelter and had been appointed because no one else wanted the position. They looked nervous. They looked uncomfortable. They looked like people who knew they were about to be used as props in a play they hadn't written. The chairman, a man named Harold Vance, no relation to Julian, just one of those coincidences that life throws at you like a joke, called the meeting to order. Mrs. Patterson, he said, and his voice was gentle, apologetic, already conceding. You have made a serious accusation against Marcus Whitfield. Would you care to present your evidence? Mrs. Patterson stood. She was small, smaller than I remembered. The kind of small that comes from years of making yourself compact, of folding yourself into corners, of becoming invisible in a world that didn't want to see you, but her voice was not small. Yesterday, she said, Marcus Whitfield took my chemistry examination. He scored 100%, every answer correct, perfect score. She paused. Marcus Whitfield has never scored above 62% in my class. He has missed 17 classes this semester. He has failed 3 quizzes. He has not turned in a single homework assignment. Room was silent. The board members shifted. My stepmother's smile tightened. And yet, Mrs. Patterson continued, he scored 100%, with answers that matched word for word the answer key that was stolen from my desk 3 days prior. A murmur, a rustle, my father's head came up, suddenly alert, suddenly present in a way he hadn't been in years. Stolen, the chairman asked. Stolen, Mrs. Patterson confirmed. I reported it to the principal. He did nothing. I reported it to the school security. They did nothing, so I changed the test. I rewrote every question. I created a new answer key, and I planted a false answer in the stolen key, a deliberate error, a formula that doesn't exist, a chemical compound that cannot be synthesized. She reached into her bag. She pulled out a paper. Marcus Whitfield wrote that false answer, the impossible compound. Formula that doesn't exist. She looked at Marcus, looked at him with something that was not anger, not hatred, but profound, exhausted disappointment. He didn't know it was false because he didn't study. He didn't learn, he simply copied. Room exploded. My stepmother stood. Her lawyers stood. My father stood, swaying slightly, his face pale, his eyes moving from Marcus to Mrs. Patterson to the paper in her hand like a man watching a car crash in slow motion. This is slander. My stepmother shouted, and her voice was perfect, controlled, the voice of a woman who had never been denied anything in her life. My son is a brilliant student. He has tutors. He studies for hours every night. This woman, this jealous, resentful woman, she has targeted him from the beginning. She hates our family. She hates our success. She was magnificent. She was terrifying. She was a force of nature, a hurricane of maternal fury, a performance so convincing that even I who knew the truth, who had died because of this truth, felt a moment of doubt. But Mrs. Patterson didn't flinch. Whitfield, she said, and her voice was quiet, but it cut through the shouting like a knife through silk. I have taught for 27 years. I have seen students cheat. I have seen parents lie. I have seen wealthy families destroy careers to protect their children's secrets. She paused, but I have never seen a mother look so proud of her son's dishonesty. Room went silent again, a different kind of silent, the kind that comes before a storm, before a breaking, before the moment when everything changes. My stepmother's face changed. The mask slipped, just for a second, just long enough to reveal the thing beneath, not love, not concern, but cold, calculating fury. The fury of a woman who had been challenged, who had been exposed, who had been caught in a lie by someone she considered beneath her. You will regret this, she whispered. Not shouted, whispered. The whisper was worse. The whisper was a promise. Mrs. Patterson smiled, the same small smile from the parking lot, the smile of someone who had already lost everything and therefore had nothing left to fear. Perhaps, she said, but I will not regret telling the truth. The board meeting ended in chaos. My stepmother's lawyers demanded an investigation of Mrs. Patterson, not Marcus. They accused her of harassment, of targeting wealthy students, of planting evidence. They produced character witnesses, private investigators' reports, psychological evaluations that claimed Mrs. Patterson was obsessed with wealth disparity and suffered from class resentment. It was a blizzard of paper, a storm of accusations, a masterclass in how wealthy people use the system to protect their own. But something had shifted. I saw it in the board members' faces, in the way they looked at Marcus, not with admiration but with suspicion, in the way they looked at my stepmother, not with deference but with discomfort, in the way the chairman kept glancing at Mrs. Patterson's paper, the one with the false formula, the impossible compound. The seed had been planted. It wouldn't sprout today, maybe not tomorrow, but it was in the ground, and I had watered it, and I would wait because I was patient. Because I was a ghost. Because I had died at 11:47 p.m. and been reborn with a ledger and nothing but time after the meeting. I followed my family to the parking lot. My stepmother was on the phone, her voice sharp, issuing commands, arranging the next phase of the war. My father was in the car, head in his hands, either crying or sleeping or both. Marcus was leaning against the Mercedes, scrolling through his phone, his face a mask of perfect unconcern, the same face he'd worn when he kicked dirty water in my face, when he raised the knife, when he watched me die. I walked past him. Invisible, furniture, a ghost, but as I passed I dropped something, a small piece of paper, folded, sealed with a drop of wax, red, the color of blood, the color of warning. Marcus didn't notice. He was too busy texting, too busy being the golden boy. Too busy being untouchable, but Julian Vance noticed. Julian, who had been waiting by his car, who had been watching the meeting through the window, who had been shaking that trembling left hand. He saw the paper fall. He saw me walk away. He saw the red wax seal, and he picked it up. I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because I knew what was written on that paper. I'd written it at 3:00 a.m. by candlelight in my freezing room, while the house slept and the clock ticked and the ghosts of my first life whispered encouragement. Julian, I know about the gambling. I know about Dimitri. I know your father is 3 months from bankruptcy and that the police are already investigating his financial advice. I also know that you helped Marcus cheat, that you have helped him cheat for 2 years, that you have accepted 400 per hour to commit academic fraud. You have a choice. Choice 1, continue protecting the Whitfields. Continue shaking. Continue waiting for the moment when your father's crimes become public and your life becomes ash. Choice 2, meet me tomorrow at 8:00 p.m. The coffee shop on Maple Street, the one with the broken neon sign. Come alone. Tell no one. I can help you, Julian. I can save your father. I can save you, but first you need to tell me everything about the Whitfields, every test, every bribe, every lie. The ledger is open, Julian, and your name is already written in it. A friend, I walked home. It was 3 miles. I could have taken the bus, could have called a car. Could have asked my father for a ride, played the dutiful son, accepted the crumbs of attention that might fall from his distracted hand. But I walked because I needed to think, because I needed to plan. Because I needed to feel the pavement under my feet, the sun on my face, the wind in my hair, all the things I hadn't felt in my first life, all the things I'd lost when I became a servant, a ghost, a dead boy with a knife in his chest. At mile 2, I stopped at a payphone. The last one in the city, probably. A relic, a ghost like me. I dialed a number from memory. A number I'd found in 2021 in a drawer with a combination. 122609. The phone rang 3 times then. Dimitri's Auto Repair. How can I help you? The voice was gruff, Russian accent, the kind of voice that fixed cars during the day and collected debts at night. Dimitri, I said, and my voice was different now. Not the servant's voice, not the ghost's voice. Something colder, something older, something that had died and been reborn with a ledger of debts. I have a job for you, a collection. Julian Vance, gambling debt, he owes. How much? A pause, rustling paper, the sound of a man checking his books. 8,000, Dimitri said, plus interest, plus fees, call it 12. Make it 15, I said, and add a deadline, 24 hours. Tell him a friend recommended he cooperate, a friend who knows about the Whitfield cheating scandal. A friend who can make his problems disappear, or multiply. Another pause, longer this time. The sound of a man reassessing, recalculating, recognizing that the voice on the other end of the line was not a victim. Not a mark, not someone to be trifled with. Who is this? Dimitri asked. I smiled. I could feel it on my face, cold and sharp and terrible. I'm the ledger, Dimitri, I said, and I'm open for business. I hung up. I walked the last mile home. And as I opened the door, as I slipped off my shoes, as I became invisible again, the servant boy, the furniture, the ghost, I heard my stepmother's voice from the study, sharp and furious and afraid. Find out who wrote that letter, she was saying. Find out who helped Patterson. Find out who is working against this family. I don't care what it costs. I don't care what you have to do. Find them and destroy them. I stood in the hallway, motionless, breathless, then I walked to my room. I opened my notebook. I wrote, Entry 5, the board meeting. Mrs. Patterson survives. The seed is planted. My stepmother suspects a traitor. She will look everywhere except where she should, at the servant boy, the furniture, the ghost who brings her coffee and smiles when she calls him useful. I paused, then I added, Julian will meet me tomorrow. Dimitri will call him tonight. And Marcus will begin to unravel, not because I will hurt him, because I will make him hurt himself. Because I will give him everything he wants and watch him destroy himself with greed. I closed the notebook. I lay on my bed. I stared at the ceiling. I listened to the clock tick, tick. Tock 11:47 p.m. In another life, I died at this time. In this life, I was alive. I was planning. I was patient, and I was only beginning. Chapter 4. The coffee shop on Maple Street had a broken neon sign that flickered like a dying heartbeat open, casting red shadows across the cracked vinyl booths, and the counter where an old man wiped the same spot with the same rag, moving in circles like a ritual, like a prayer, like someone who had been waiting for something that never came. I arrived at 7:45 p.m., 15 minutes early. The habit of a servant, of someone who had learned that punctuality was the only virtue that couldn't be punished, the only obedience that might earn a crumb of tolerance. I sat in the last booth, the one in the corner, the one where the flickering sign cast the most shadows, where the surveillance camera had a blind spot, where no one looked because nothing ever happened. I ordered black coffee, the cheapest thing on the menu. I didn't drink it. I just needed to occupy space, to look like I belonged, to be invisible in the way that only people who have spent years being ignored truly understand. At 8:03 p.m., Julian Vance walked in. He looked worse than he had that morning. His expensive glasses were smudged, his cheap shoes were scuffed, his left hand shook so badly he had to grip the doorframe to steady himself. He was carrying a folder, thick, heavy, the kind of folder that held secrets, the kind that could destroy lives, the kind that men sold their souls to keep hidden or to expose. He saw me immediately, not because I was visible, because I was the only person in the coffee shop under 60, because I was the only one sitting alone. Because I was the only one who looked at him not with indifference but with recognition, the recognition of a predator who has finally cornered his prey, or a ghost who has finally found someone who can see him. He walked to my booth. He didn't sit. He stood there trembling, the folder clutched against his chest like a shield, like a prayer, like the last thing standing between him and the abyss. The boy, he said, not a question, a statement, a realization. The kind of realization that comes too late, after the trap has already closed, after the poison has already been swallowed, after the debt has already come due. Sit, Julian, I said, and my voice was different now, not the servant's voice, not the ghost's voice, something older, something colder, something that had died at 11:47 p.m. and learned that death was not an ending but an education. He sat, the vinyl creaked, the neon flickered. The old man behind the counter wiped his spot and pretended not to watch, which meant he was watching everything. I got the call, Julian said. His voice was a whisper, a confession, a last testament. Dmitri, he said 15,000. He said 24 hours. He said a friend recommended cooperation. He looked at me with eyes that were not just afraid but betrayed by a world that had promised him privilege and delivered only debt, betrayed by a father who had taught him to cheat and then left him to face the consequences alone. Who are you? How do you know these things? I smiled, the same smile my stepmother used, the one that didn't reach my eyes, the one that calculated and assessed and found the other person wanting. The boy you never noticed, Julian, I said. The one who brought your coffee, the one who cleaned your table, the one who watched you shake and knew exactly why. His face changed, the recognition finally coming, slow and terrible, like dawn breaking over a battlefield. Servant, he whispered. The Whitfield boy, the stepson. Ethan, I said. My name is Ethan. And yes, I am the stepson, the servant, the furniture. I leaned forward. The neon flickered red across my face, turning my 16-year-old features into something demonic, something ancient, something that had no right to exist in a coffee shop on Maple Street. But I'm also the man who died with a knife in his chest at 11:47 p.m., 10 years from now, because of the family you're helping, because of the lies you're telling, because of the system you're propping up with your 400 an hour fraud. I let that sit, I let him absorb it, the impossibility. The madness, the terrifying, liberating truth that the boy in front of him was not a boy at all but something else, something that remembered, something that had come back with a ledger and a purpose. Insane, Julian said, but his voice lacked conviction. Because insane people don't know the things I knew. Insane people don't predict the future with the precision of a prophecy. Insane people don't sit in coffee shops at 8:00 p.m., calmly waiting for their prey to deliver themselves. Perhaps, I said, but insane or not, I know about your father's bankruptcy. I know about Dimitri's debt. I know about the embezzlement investigation that will arrest Reginald Vance in 2022 and sentence him to 8 years in prison. I paused. And I know that you have a choice, Julian. A choice that no one else can give you. A choice that will determine whether you spend the next decade visiting your father in prison or watching him die a free man. His hands trembled. The folder trembled with them. The secrets inside shifting, whispering, begging to be released or buried forever. What choice? He asked. I reached across the table. I opened the folder. I didn't take it, not yet. I just opened it. I let him see that I wasn't afraid of what was inside, that I already knew, that I had always known. Give me everything, I said. Every receipt, every email, every recorded conversation, every test you helped Marcus cheat, every bribe you delivered. Every lie you told. I looked up at him, met his eyes, let him see the thing that lived behind my 16-year-old face, the patience, the rage, the terrible, beautiful certainty of a man who had already died and therefore had nothing left to fear. And in return, I will give you something no one else can. I will give you the name of the FBI agent who will arrest your father. I will give you the date of the raid. I will give you the evidence that will exonerate him, evidence that is currently hidden in a safety deposit box in Delaware, evidence that your father's business partner planted to frame him, evidence that no one else knows exists. I paused, and I will give you Dimitri's phone number, the real one, not the debt collection, the emergency line, the one he gives only to people who have paid him enough to earn his loyalty. Call it, tell him Ethan sent you, tell him the debt is cleared, tell him. Tell him the ledger is closed. Julian stared at me. He stared at me like I was a ghost, like I was a god, like I was the devil himself, offering a deal that was too good to be true, too terrible to refuse, too perfectly calibrated to his desperation to be anything but a trap. Why? He finally asked. Why help me? Why do any of this? I closed the folder. I slid it across the table. I took it in my hands, heavy, warm, alive with the weight of secrets, and I held it like a child, like a weapon, like the first real thing I had ever owned. Because, Julian, I said, you're not the enemy, you're a symptom, a tool, a cog in a machine that would have ground you to dust just like it ground me. I stood. The neon flickered red across my face, my chest, my hands holding the folder of secrets. The enemy is the machine, the family. The system that tells us some people are born to be used and others are born to use them. And I'm going to destroy that machine, piece by piece, lie by lie, debt by debt. I walked to the door. I stopped. I didn't look back. Called Dmitri. I said, tonight, before midnight. And Julian, don't ever help Marcus cheat again. Not because I'll punish you, because I won't need to. In 6 months, Marcus Whitfield won't have a family. He won't have money. He won't have the power to hire tutors or bribe teachers or destroy lives. I paused. The door was cold against my palm. The night was waiting. He'll have nothing, just like I had nothing, just like you had nothing, and then we'll see what kind of man he is when the world stops giving him everything. I pushed through the door, the bell jangled, the neon flickered. And I was gone. I walked home through the dark streets, the folder clutched against my chest, my heart hammering against my ribs, my mind racing through the possibilities, the plans, the terrible, beautiful machinery of revenge. I had everything now, the receipts, the emails, the recorded conversations. Julian had been smarter than I thought, smarter than his father, smart enough to record every transaction, every bribe, every instruction from my stepmother. Insurance, he called it. Protection against the very family he was serving. He had been building his own ledger, his own record of debts, and now it was mine. I could expose them all. Tomorrow, I could walk into the school board, the newspaper, the police station, and I could lay out the evidence like a surgeon laying out instruments. I could destroy them in a day. Or, in the time it took for a headline to print, for a handcuff to click, for a reputation to burn, but I wouldn't, because destruction was too easy, because exposure was too quick, because my stepmother, my father Marcus, they deserved something worse than justice. They deserved understanding. They deserved to know in their bones, in their blood, in the moment before they lost everything, exactly what they had done, exactly who they had used, exactly how much it cost. I was going to make them pay. Not with prison, not with scandal, not with the quick, clean mercy of public exposure. I was going to make them pay with themselves, with their own greed, their own arrogance, their own cruelty turned inward like a knife, cutting the hand that held it. I was going to give them everything they wanted, and watch them destroy themselves with it. I reached my house at 9:47 p.m. The lights were on in my stepmother's study. The Mercedes was in the driveway. My father's car was gone, probably at the office, probably at a bar, probably somewhere that wasn't here, that wasn't home, that wasn't the place where his family was falling apart and he was too drunk to notice. I slipped through the side door, the servants' entrance. The door that creaked and stuck and no one ever fixed, because servants don't complain, servants endure, servants are useful. I climbed the stairs to my room. My freezing room. My room above the garage, where I could hear Marcus's sports car and the girls he brought home and the life he lived, while I scrubbed floors and cooked meals, and died at 11:47 p.m. with a knife in my chest. I locked the door, I sat on my bed, I opened the folder, and I began to read. The receipts were meticulous. Julian had recorded every payment, every date, every purpose. 2 years of academic fraud, documented with the precision of an accountant or a criminal or someone who had learned that evidence was the only currency that mattered in a world of lies. September 2014, 400, chemistry test. Marcus scored 78%. November 2014, 800. Midterm exams, 3 subjects. Marcus scored 82%, 85%, 79%. January 2015, 1,200. Final exams. 5 subjects. Marcus scored 84%, 81%, 86%, 80%, 83%. The pattern was clear. The grades were carefully calibrated, high enough to impress, not high enough to raise suspicion. The perfect fraud, the perfect lie. The perfect system that turned a mediocre, lazy, cruel boy into the image of academic excellence. And my stepmother had paid for all of it, not my father, her, from her personal account. The same account where she hid the embezzled money, the same account that would be discovered in 2021, the same account that would lead to her arrest and conviction and the destruction of everything she had built. I turned the page and found the emails from C. Whitfield at Whitfield Industries, com. Marcus's progress. Julian, Marcus's chemistry teacher, is becoming suspicious. She asked him to explain a formula he supposedly mastered. He couldn't. You need to adjust your methods. Make sure he understands the basics, not just the answers. We can't afford another incident like the midterm. J. Vance tutoring at email.com. Ray, Marcus's progress misses. Whitfield, I understand your concern, but Marcus refuses to study. He expects me to do the work for him. I've tried explaining concepts, but he interrupts, demands the answers, and threatens to have me fired if I don't comply. I'm not sure how much longer I can maintain this arrangement. See Whitfield at Whitfield Industries, com. Ray, Marcus's progress. Julian, you're paid to handle problems, not create them. If Marcus wants answers, give him answers. If he wants to pass without studying, make it happen. That's what 400 an hour buys. And Julian, if you ever suggest that my son is lazy or difficult again, I'll make sure you never tutor in this city. I have that power, remember it. I read the exchange 3 times. Each time the cold thing in my chest grew colder. Each time the ledger in my mind grew heavier. Each time the image of my stepmother, her perfect suit, her perfect smile, her perfect maternal performance became more monstrous, more calculated, more deliberate. She knew she had always known. She didn't care about Marcus's education. She didn't care about his future. She cared about the image, the narrative. The story that the world told about the Whitfield family, perfect son, perfect mother, perfect life. And she was willing to destroy anyone who threatened that story. Teachers, tutors, servant boys who scored too high on tests. Anyone. I turned the page again and found the recordings. Julian had recorded 3 phone conversations. I didn't have a player, but I had the transcripts, typed, dated, annotated with the same obsessive precision as everything else. Recording 1 October 14, 2015. Mrs. Whitfield, Julian, I need you to handle something. Marcus's English teacher, Mrs. Goldstein, she's asking questions about his college essay. She says it sounds professionally written. I need you to write another one, something worse, something that sounds like a teenager wrote it. Can you do that? Of course, Mrs. Whitfield, but the original essay was excellent. Marcus could get into a top school with, I don't care about top schools, Julian. I care about believability. I care about making sure no one looks too closely. Write a mediocre essay, something that gets him into a good school, not a great one. We want impressive, not suspicious. Do you understand? Yes, I understand. Good. And Julian, this conversation never happened. Recording 2 January 3, 2016. Marcus, hey tutor boy. Mom says you're complaining about me again, says you're not happy with my attitude. You know what my attitude is, Julian. My attitude is that I'm Marcus Whitfield, I'm rich, I'm important, and you're a nobody who gets paid to make me look smart. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to keep doing your job, and I'm going to keep treating you like the servant you are. And if you ever talk back to my mother again, I'll make sure you end up like Ethan. You know Ethan, the stepbrother. The one we keep around to clean toilets. That could be you, Julian, that will be you, remember it. Recording 3 March 22, 2016. Mrs. Whitfield, Julian, I have a new job for you. There's a boy at Marcus's school, Derek Chen. He's applying to the same colleges. His scores are inconvenient, higher than Marcus's. I need you to find something, a weakness, a scandal, anything that can be used. Mrs. Whitfield, I don't do that kind of. You do now. Or you find a new career, your choice. Pause, I'll see what I can find. And Julian, the stepbrother, Ethan, he's been asking questions about Marcus's grades, about the tutors, about things he shouldn't know. I need you to keep an eye on him. Report back. He's useful, but useful things can become dangerous if they start thinking. Watch him. No, Julian, you'll handle him. Make sure he knows his place. Make sure he remembers that he's not family. He's not even staff. He's, what did Marcus call him? Furniture. Yes, make sure the furniture stays quiet. I put the transcript down. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. From the terrible, beautiful, patient rage that had been building since I woke up in my 16-year-old body, since I looked in the mirror and saw a boy who didn't know he was already dead, since I opened my notebook and wrote the first line of the ledger, furniture. That's what I was to them. That's what I had always been. That's what I would have remained, scrubbing and cooking and smiling and dying, if the knife hadn't ended my first life and given me this second chance. But I wasn't furniture anymore. I was the ledger. I was the ghost who remembered. I was the boy who died at 11:47 p.m. and woke up with a list of debts that would be paid in full, with interest, with the compounded cruelty of 10 years of servitude. I picked up the transcript again. I turned the page. And I found the photograph. It was small, wallet-sized, faded at the edges, creased down the middle, the kind of photograph that had been carried and hidden and wept over. The kind that survived by being invisible, by being unimportant, by being the last thing anyone would look for in a folder of fraud and corruption. It was a woman. She was standing in front of a house, not our house, not the Whitfield mansion, but a smaller house, a cottage really, with a garden and a porch and a cat sleeping on the railing. She was smiling, not the performative smile of my stepmother, not the cruel smile of Marcus, but a real smile, the kind that reached the eyes, the kind that made wrinkles, the kind that said, I am alive, I am here, I am happy. It was my mother, my real mother, the one who had died of cancer when I was 8. One whose funeral I wasn't allowed to attend because it's too upsetting for a child. Ethan, you'll stay home with the staff. The one whose photograph had been removed from the house, erased from the albums, turned into a ghost that only existed in my memory and my dreams. But here she was, alive, and the date on the back of the photograph, written in blue ink, in handwriting I recognized but had never seen before, was March 15, 2011, 3 years after her supposed death. 3 years after I was told she was gone forever. 3 years after my father married my stepmother and brought Marcus home and turned me from a son into a servant. I turned the photograph over, and I read the line on the back, the line that changed everything, the line that made the ledger not just a record of debts but a map to a mystery, a key to a door, a thread that led into a darkness I hadn't known existed. Ethan, they're lying about everything. Find me. I sat on my bed. The photograph in my hand, the folder open beside me, the clock ticking on the wall, not the same clock from my first life, not the one that had watched me die, but a different clock, a cheaper clock, the kind that servants had in their rooms, the kind that didn't matter enough to be noticed. Tick-tock, tick-tock, I looked at the photograph, I looked at my mother's face, I looked at the date, and I felt something crack inside me, not the cold rage, not the patient calculation, something else. Something that had been buried under 10 years of servitude, under the knife, under the death, under the rebirth. Hope, the hope that my mother was alive, the hope that she had escaped. The hope that she had been trying to find me, to save me, to tell me the truth about everything, the cancer, the marriage, the stepmother, the transformation of a family into a machine that consumed its own children. And the fear that she was dead after all, that the photograph was a fake, that the handwriting was a forgery. That M was not my mother but someone else, something else, another layer of the lie that I had been living since I was 8 years old. I turned the photograph over again. I studied the handwriting. The M was written with a flourish, a loop at the top, a tail at the bottom, the way she used to sign her name on my birthday cards, on my school permission slips, on the notes she left in my lunchbox when I was small enough to need notes, to need reassurance, to need a mother who loved me. It was her handwriting, I was sure of it, as sure as I was sure that I had died at 11:47 p.m., as sure as I was sure that Marcus had kicked dirty water in my face, as sure as I was sure that my stepmother's smile was a mask and her kindness was a weapon and her love was a lie. It was her, she was alive, or she had been alive in 2011, 5 years ago, 5 years that I had spent as a servant, as furniture, as a ghost, 5 years that she had spent. Where? Doing what? Running from whom? I opened my notebook, I turned to a fresh page, and I wrote, Entry 6, the photograph, my mother, alive, dated March 15, 2011, 3 years after her supposed death. Message, they're lying about everything, find me. M questions, where is she? Why did she leave? Did she know about the stepmother? Did she know about me? Did she try to save me? New priority, find her, before the ledger is closed, before the revenge is complete. Before I become so consumed by destruction that I forget there might still be something worth saving. I paused, then I added, but first, Marcus, the board meeting, the exposure. The first domino must fall, because if my mother is alive, then everything I know about my family is a lie, and if everything is a lie, then the truth is the only weapon that matters. I closed the notebook, I looked at the photograph one more time, my mother, smiling, alive, waiting. Find me, she had written, and I would. But first I would make them pay, all of them, for the lies, for the cruelty, for the 10 years of servitude that had turned a boy into a ghost and a ghost into a weapon. I lay down on my bed, I closed my eyes, I listened to the clock tick, and I dreamed of my mother's face and my stepmother's mask and Marcus's knife and the moment, the beautiful, terrible, inevitable moment, when the ledger would finally balance. At 11:47 p.m. I woke up, not from a noise. Not from a dream, from a certainty that something was wrong, something in the house, something in the air, something in the silence that was too complete, too deliberate, too waiting. I sat up, I listened, and I heard it, footsteps, soft, careful. The footsteps of someone who didn't want to be heard, who was practiced in stealth, who had learned to move through darkness like a shadow. They were coming from the hall, they were coming toward my door. I grabbed the folder. I shoved it under my mattress. I grabbed the photograph, my mother's face, her smile, her message, and I pressed it against my chest, under my shirt, against my heart. The footsteps stopped. Outside my door, I held my breath. The doorknob turned, slowly, silently. The way a predator tests a trap, the way a thief tests a lock, the way a murderer tests a victim's vulnerability. It was unlocked. I had forgotten to lock it. In my shock, in my discovery, in my desperate reading of the folder and the photograph and the impossible truth of my mother's survival, I had forgotten. The door opened, and Marcus stood in the frame. He was different from this morning. The perfect suit was gone. The perfect posture was gone. The mask of wounded innocence had been replaced by something raw, something exposed, something that had been scraped down to the bone by the day's events. The accusation, the board meeting, his mother's fury, his father's disappointment, the slow, terrible realization that his perfect world was beginning to crack. He was drunk. Not the club drunk of the morning, something deeper, something darker, the drunk of a man who has looked into the abyss and seen himself looking back. Ethan, he said. And his voice was different too, not the usual contempt, not the casual cruelty. Something almost like recognition, like he was seeing me for the first time. Like the furniture had finally moved, finally spoken, finally become something that couldn't be ignored. Marcus, I said, my voice was steady. My heart was hammering. My mother's photograph was pressed against my chest, warm from my body, hidden from his eyes. You were at the meeting, he said, not a question, a statement. A realization. I saw you in the back row, the last seat, the one where no one sits. He paused. His eyes were red, unfocused, but there was something sharp in them, something that cut through the alcohol like a knife through fog. Mother sent you. She sent you to watch, to spy, to be her little servant even in the places where servants don't belong. I said nothing. I let him talk. I let him accuse. I let him build his own narrative, his own explanation, his own reason for standing in my doorway at 11:47 p.m., the exact time, the exact minute, the exact second when I had died in another life. Not supposed to be there, he said. His voice was rising. Not shouting yet, but building toward it, gathering momentum like a storm gathering force. You're not supposed to know things. You're not supposed to see things. You're furniture. You're a servant. You're nothing. He stepped into the room. I didn't move. I was sitting on my bed, my back against the wall, my mother's photograph hidden against my heart, my notebook under my pillow, my mind racing through possibilities, through plans, through the terrible calculus of survival. Marcus, I said, and my voice was soft. Servant soft, ghost soft, the voice that had kept me alive for 10 years, the voice that disarmed, that placated, that made me invisible. I was just worried, about you, about the family. I wanted to help, he laughed, a broken sound, a sound like glass shattering, like bones cracking, like the world ending. You want to help you, he was closer now, close enough that I could smell the alcohol on his breath, the sweat on his skin, the particular sourness of fear and rage and desperation. You can't help, you can't do anything, you're useless, you're worse than useless, you're a parasite, living off our family, eating our food, sleeping in our house. Pretending to be one of us. He was standing over me now, towering, the way he had towered over me in the kitchen in another life at another time, with a knife in his hand and a bucket of dirty water at his feet. "You know what Mother says," he whispered. "She says you're dangerous. She says you've been asking questions. She says you're not as stupid as you look." He leaned down. His face was inches from mine. His eyes were wild, unfocused, seeing things that weren't there, seeing things that had been buried under years of privilege and cruelty, and the absolute certainty that he would never face consequences. "She says I should watch you. She says I should make sure you know your place. She says." He paused, his breath was hot against my face. "She says I should remind you of what you are, of what you'll always be." His hand moved. I saw it the way I had seen it before in another life at another time, with the clock ticking and the world going red. His hand moved toward my throat, and I moved, not fast, not dramatically, just enough. I slid sideways off the bed onto my feet, standing in the corner of the room where the shadows were deepest, where the broken heater cast the most darkness, where no one looked because nothing ever happened. Marcus stumbled. He was drunk, uncoordinated, unused to resistance, unused to the furniture moving, the servant speaking, the ghost becoming. He started. "Know about the tests, Marcus," I said. My voice was different now, not servant soft, not ghost soft, something harder. Something that had died and been reborn and learned that survival was not about invisibility but about timing. "I know about Julian. I know about the bribes. I know about the answer keys and the fake essays and the way Mother paid to turn you into something you're not." I paused. I let him absorb it. I let the words cut through the alcohol and the rage and the desperate need to feel powerful. "I know everything, Marcus, and I can help you, but not the way you think, not by being your servant. Not by being your furniture." He stared at me. His hand was still raised, still reaching for my throat, still caught in the motion of violence that had been interrupted by something he didn't understand. "Then how?" he whispered, and in his voice, in the broken, desperate, terrified whisper of a man who had never been challenged, never been denied, never been forced to face the truth, I heard something I hadn't expected. Fear, not of me, not of exposure, not of the consequences of his actions. Fear of being found out, fear of being seen, fear of the world finally looking at Marcus Whitfield and seeing what was really there, not a golden boy, not a brilliant student, not a perfect son, but a mediocre, frightened, cruel child who had been given everything and had learned nothing. "I can help you become real," I said. The lie was beautiful. It was poetry. It was the most dangerous thing I had ever said. "Real," he repeated. "Real," I confirmed. "Not the image, not the performance. Not the perfect grades and the perfect essays and the perfect life that Mother bought for you. You, the real Marcus, whoever that is." He lowered his hand. He looked at me. And for a moment, just a flicker in the darkness like the dying neon sign in the coffee shop, I saw something in his eyes that wasn't rage or contempt or cruelty. I saw hope. The same hope I had felt when I looked at my mother's photograph. The hope that there was still something real underneath the mask. The hope that it wasn't too late. The hope that even the most broken things could be fixed. "Lying," he said, but he didn't move. He didn't attack. He didn't raise his hand again. "Perhaps," I said, "but I'm the only one who has ever told you the truth, Marcus. Think about it. Mother lies to you. Father ignores you. Julian cheats for you. The world gives you everything and tells you that you earned it." I paused. "I'm the only one who has ever looked at you and seen what you really are. And I'm still here, still offering to help, still." I let the word hang. "Still what?" he asked. "Still hopping," I said. "That there's something worth saving, even in you." He stood there for a long moment. The clock ticked. 11:47 p.m. The moment of my death, the moment of my rebirth, the moment when everything changed. And then slowly, carefully, like a man waking from a dream, Marcus Whitfield turned and walked out of my room. He didn't close the door. He didn't say another word. He just left, and I stood in the darkness, my mother's photograph pressed against my heart, my notebook under my pillow, my mind racing with the implications of what had just happened. Marcus knew I was dangerous, but he hadn't attacked me. He had listened. He had hoped. And that hope, that terrible, fragile, dangerous hope, was the most powerful weapon I had ever discovered, because hope meant doubt, doubt meant weakness. And weakness meant that the perfect machine of the Whitfield family was beginning to rust. I walked to the door, I closed it, I locked it, and I wrote in my notebook, Entry 7, Marcus. 11:47 p.m. He came to threaten me. He left, uncertain. He knows I know. He knows I'm dangerous. But he also knows, somewhere deep down, that I'm telling him the truth, that his life is a lie, that his mother is using him, that his perfection is purchased, not earned. This is the crack. The first fracture in the foundation. I will widen it. I will deepen it. I will pour water into it and let it freeze and expand until the entire structure crumbles. But first, my mother, the photograph, the message, the impossible truth that she might be alive. Two paths now. Two ledgers, the ledger of revenge and the ledger of hope. I don't know which one will balance first, but I know that 11:47 p.m. will never be just a time of death again. It will be a time of choices. And tonight, I chose to live. Chapter 5. The cottage was exactly as I remembered from the photograph, small, weathered, with a porch that sagged slightly in the middle and a garden that had grown wild, untamed, beautiful in its refusal to be controlled. The cat was there too, an orange tabby with one torn ear, sleeping on the railing in the same patch of sunlight that had illuminated my mother's smile 5 years ago. I stood at the gate for 10 minutes before knocking, not because I was afraid, because I was preparing. Because I was rehearsing. Because I was a 16-year-old boy with a 26-year-old's memories, standing in front of a door that might hold the answer to everything, and I needed to be ready for whatever was on the other side. The door opened before I could knock. She was not my mother. I knew this immediately. The height was wrong, the hair was wrong, the eyes were a different shade of brown, almost amber, like honey in sunlight rather than the deep chocolate I remembered. But she had my mother's sadness. Mother's strength, the particular way of holding herself, straight but not rigid, as if she had learned to carry weight without letting it break her. Ethan, she said, not a question, a recognition, as if she had been waiting, as if she had known I would come. As if the photograph, the message, the entire chain of impossible clues had been designed specifically to lead me here, to this moment, to this door, to this woman who was not my mother but knew my name. You know me, I said, not a question either. I knew your mother, she said, and her voice was soft, worn, the voice of someone who had told this story before, who had practiced it in empty rooms, who had never expected to tell it to the person it mattered most to. May I call you Ethan, or do you prefer something else? The Whitfields never used your name, did they? They called you boy. Servant, furniture. She paused. Your mother hated that. She hated it more than she hated the cancer, more than she hated him. The fact that he erased you, that he made you invisible in your own life. She stepped aside. Come in, she said. I'll make tea, and I'll tell you what I know, what your mother wanted you to know, what she made me promise to keep until you came looking. I crossed the threshold. The cottage smelled of lavender and old books and something else, something I couldn't identify, something that made my chest ache with a memory I couldn't place. My mother's perfume perhaps, or the smell of her hair when she tucked me in at night, before the cancer, before the stepmother, before the transformation of a boy into a ghost. The woman, she never gave me her name, not then, not ever, led me to a kitchen that was small and cluttered and alive. Plants on every windowsill. Pots hanging from the ceiling. A kettle that whistled like a bird, steam rising in curls that caught the sunlight and turned into rainbows. She poured tea into chipped ceramic cups. She sat across from me and she began to speak. Your mother's cancer was real, she said. At first, the diagnosis, the treatment, the hospital, all real, but the prognosis was a lie. She wrapped her hands around her cup, warming them, though the day was warm and the kitchen was sunlit, and there was no reason for her to be cold except the cold that comes from memory, from truth, from the weight of secrets carried too long. Your father, your real father, the man who existed before the drinking, before the absence, before the stepmother turned him into a puppet, he loved your mother. Truly, deeply, the kind of love that doesn't disappear when someone gets sick. The kind of love that makes you desperate, that makes you willing to do anything to save them. She paused, sipped her tea, looked at me with eyes that saw too much, that knew too much, that had watched my mother's plan unfold from the outside, helpless to stop it, helpless to help, only able to promise and wait and hope. Your stepmother, Clarissa, she was your mother's oncologist's research partner, not a doctor herself, a fundraiser, a networker. A woman who understood that medicine was as much about money as it was about healing. She met your father at the hospital. She saw his desperation. She saw his wealth, and she saw an opportunity. I held my cup but didn't drink. My hands were steady, my heart was not. She told your father about an experimental treatment, expensive, exclusive, available only through private clinics in Switzerland. She said she had connections. She said she could save your mother. And your father, desperate, grieving, clinging to any hope, he believed her. Woman set down her cup. She reached into her pocket. She pulled out a photograph different from the one I had found but similar. The same cottage, the same garden, the same cat, younger, both ears intact. Your mother didn't die in 2008, she said. She was taken, smuggled, hidden. Clarissa's experimental treatment was a lie. There was no clinic, no doctors, no hope, just a facility. A place where people disappear, where wealthy families hide inconvenient relatives, where the dead are kept alive but silent, unable to speak, unable to escape, unable to prove they ever existed. She slid the photograph across the table. I looked at it, my mother, standing in front of this cottage, but not free, not happy. Her smile was wrong, too tight, too careful, the smile of someone who was being watched, who knew that every moment was monitored, who had learned to perform happiness for an audience that would punish any deviation. Behind her, barely visible in the shadow of the porch, stood a man, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that cost more than this cottage, my father. Your father knew, the woman said. Not at first, but eventually. He found out, he visited. He saw what Clarissa had done not just to your mother, but to him. She had trapped them both, your mother as a prisoner, your father as a co-conspirator, too deep in the lie to escape without destroying himself. She paused, and then he made a choice, the worst choice, the choice that turned him from a victim into a monster. He chose to protect the lie, to protect Clarissa, to protect himself. He married her, he brought her home, he gave her access to his wealth, his company, his life. And he gave her you. I closed my eyes. I saw my father's face. The face from my childhood, kind, present, alive. The face that had disappeared gradually, replaced by the hollow-eyed man who drank in his car, who worked 16-hour days, who couldn't look at me without seeing my mother, without seeing what he had done, without seeing the lie that had consumed his soul. He gave you to Clarissa as a hostage, the woman continued. A replacement, a thing to control, a servant to break. Because if you were broken, if you were reduced to furniture, to nothing, then you would never ask questions. You would never search for your mother. You would never discover the truth. She reached across the table. She touched my hand, the first human touch I had felt in years that wasn't violence or manipulation, the first touch that carried no debt, no ledger, no hidden calculation. Your mother escaped in 2011, she said. She found a way out, a nurse who pitied her, a guard who fell asleep, a door that was left unlocked. She ran to me. We had been friends in college, before the cancer, before the marriage, before everything. She told me everything. She made me promise. Promise what? I asked. My voice was barely audible, a whisper, a ghost's voice. To wait, she said, to watch, to protect the truth until you were ready, until you were strong enough, until you came looking. She squeezed my hand. She couldn't contact you directly. Clarissa monitored everything, your mail, your phone, your school, your friends. Any contact would have led them back to her. Any hint that she was alive would have resulted in her being taken again. Or worse. Worse, the woman's eyes darkened. She withdrew her hand. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the garden, the wildflowers, the cat sleeping in the sun. Clarissa has a facility, she said, not just for hiding people, for ending them quietly, permanently, no bodies, no evidence, no questions. Your mother was meant to go there eventually, when Clarissa decided she was no longer useful as leverage, when your father finally stopped visiting. When the lie was so complete that no one would ever believe the truth, she turned to face me. Your mother escaped before that could happen, but she couldn't take you with her. She couldn't risk it. You were too closely watched, too controlled, too useful. The word hit me like a physical blow. Useful, the same word my stepmother used. The same word that defined my existence. The same word that had turned a boy into a servant, a son into furniture, a human being into a tool. But now I understood. It wasn't just cruelty. It was strategy. It was control. It was the mechanism by which Clarissa Whitfield maintained her empire, by breaking the things that might threaten her, by reducing people to functions, by making sure that no one ever had the strength or the knowledge or the freedom to fight back. I opened my eyes. I looked at the woman, my mother's friend, the keeper of her secrets, the guardian of a truth that had been hidden for 8 years. Where is she now? I asked. The woman shook her head. I don't know, she said. She left in 2013. She said she had found something, evidence, proof that could destroy Clarissa and free your father if he wanted to be freed. She said she was going to get it. She said she would come back for you. She paused, her eyes filled with tears she didn't shed. She never came back. I don't know if she's alive. I don't know if she's dead. I don't know if she's in the facility or free or somewhere in between. I only know that she made me promise to wait, to watch, to tell you the truth when you finally came. She walked back to the table. She sat down. She looked at me with an intensity that was almost painful, almost loving, almost like my mother's eyes had looked at me in the photograph, sad, strong, full of a hope that had survived against all odds. She believed in you, the woman said. Even when you were 8 years old, even when she was dying or pretending to die, she told me, Ethan is stronger than he knows. He will survive them. He will endure. And one day he will come looking for me. And when he does, tell him everything. Tell him I never stopped loving him. Tell him I never stopped fighting. Tell him the ledger is not just his. It's mine too. And one day we will balance it together. I sat in the cottage for 2 hours. I drank cold tea. I looked at photographs. I listened to stories about my mother, stories from before the cancer, before the marriage, before the transformation of a family into a prison. Stories about her laughter, her intelligence, her stubbornness, her refusal to accept the world as it was instead of how it should be. The woman told me everything, and I told her nothing, not about my death, not about my rebirth, not about the ledger or the knife or the clock that ticked at 11:47 p.m. Not about Marcus or Julian or Dimitri or the folder of secrets hidden under my mattress, because some truths are too heavy to share, because some burdens are meant to be carried alone, because I was still a ghost, still a weapon, still a boy who had died and been reborn with a purpose that no one else could understand or share. But when I stood to leave, when I walked to the door, when I paused with my hand on the frame and the afternoon sun warm on my face, I turned back. Thank you, I said. And I meant it, not just for the truth, not just for the waiting, not just for the promise kept across 8 years of silence, but for the proof that my mother had loved me, that she had fought for me, that she had never stopped, even when I was furniture, even when I was a servant, even when I was a dead boy with a knife in his chest and a clock on the wall. She had believed in me, and that belief, that terrible, beautiful, fragile belief, was the most powerful weapon I had ever discovered. More powerful than the folder, more powerful than the recordings, more powerful than revenge itself, because it meant I was not alone, even in my invisibility, even in my servitude, even in my death. Someone had seen me, someone had loved me, someone had kept the light burning in the darkness, waiting for me to find my way home. I walked back through the garden. The cat woke up. It looked at me with amber eyes, the same shade as the woman's, the same shade as my mother's in the photograph. It stretched. It yawned, it went back to sleep. I opened the gate, I stepped onto the road, and I heard the woman's voice behind me, soft but clear, carrying across the wildflowers and the afternoon sun and the 8 years of waiting. Ethan, she said. I turned. Your mother left something else, something she said you would need when you were ready, when you had the truth. She held out a small box, wooden, carved with a pattern I recognized, my mother's initials, intertwined with mine, the same pattern she had drawn on my birthday cards, on my lunchbox notes, on the wall above my bed when I was small enough to need protection from the dark. I took it, I opened it. Inside was a key, small, brass, old, and a note in my mother's handwriting, the same handwriting from the photograph, the same M with the flourish at the top and the tail at the bottom. Facility, 247 Westbrook Lane. The basement, this key opens the east wing. The records are there, every prisoner, every name, every date, proof that Clarissa has been running this operation for 15 years, proof that your father knew, proof that the Whitfield fortune was built on silence and suffering. Burn it down, Ethan, burn it all down, but first find me. I'm still out there, I'm still fighting. And I'm still waiting for my son to come home. I closed the box. I put it in my pocket. I walked away. The sun was setting when I reached the bus stop. The sky was orange and red and purple, the colors of fire, of destruction, of the world ending and beginning again. I sat on the bench, I opened my notebook, and I wrote, Entry 8, the cottage, the woman, the truth, my mother is alive, or was alive in 2013. She escaped Clarissa's facility in 2011. She found evidence. She was going to expose everything. She disappeared in 2013. I don't know if she's alive, I don't know if she's dead, I don't know if she's free or imprisoned or somewhere in between, but I have a key, an address, a mission 247 Westbrook Lane, the East Wing, the records. This changes everything. The ledger was about revenge, about making them pay for what they did to me. But now it's about more. It's about her, about finding her, about saving her. About finishing what she started. 2 ledgers, 2 paths. The path of revenge, Marcus, the board, the exposure, the destruction of the Whitfield image. And the path of rescue, the facility, the records, the truth that could destroy not just a family but an empire. I don't know which path to take first. I don't know if I can walk both. I don't know if I have the strength, the time, the patience, but I know this: I am not furniture. I am not a servant. I am not a ghost. I am Ethan Whitfield. Son of a woman who never stopped fighting, heir to a ledger of debts that spans 15 years, and I am done being invisible. The game has changed. The stakes are higher, and the clock is ticking. Tick, tock, 11:47 p.m. the time of my death, the time of my rebirth, the time when everything begins. I closed the notebook, the bus arrived, I got on. And as the city passed outside the window, the Whitfield mansion growing closer, the lights of my prison growing brighter, the night swallowing the last of the sunset, I felt something I hadn't felt since I was 8 years old. Purpose, not just revenge, not just survival, but purpose. The purpose of a son who had discovered that his mother was alive. The purpose of a boy who had died and been reborn, not just to destroy but to save. The purpose of Ethan Whitfield: furniture, servant, ghost, ledger, weapon, and finally, human being. The house was dark when I arrived. My stepmother's study was empty. My father's car was gone. Marcus's room was silent, no music, no girls, no sounds of a golden boy living a golden life. I climbed the stairs to my room. I locked the door. I hid the box, my mother's box, her key, her note, her hope, in the safest place I knew, under the floorboard beneath my bed. The same floorboard where in my first life I had hidden my notebook, the notebook that had been found after my death, the notebook that had been burned, the notebook that had been erased like everything else about me. But this box would not be burned, this key would not be erased, this hope would not be destroyed, because I was not the boy I had been, I was the ledger. And the ledger was permanent. At 10:30 p.m. there was a knock at my door, soft, hesitant, not my stepmother's commanding rap. Not my father's drunken stumble, something else, something uncertain. I opened the door. Marcus stood in the frame, different from last night. Sober now, dressed in sweatpants and a t-shirt that had seen better days. His hair was messy, his eyes were red, he looked like he hadn't slept. Ethan, he said, and his voice was different too, not the cruelty, not the contempt, something else. Something that might have been if I was generous, if I was hopeful, if I was willing to believe that even monsters had mothers, vulnerability. I need to talk to you, he said. About what you said, about being real, about. He paused. His hands were shaking, not like Julian's tremor, not like the symptom of debt and desperation, but like the shaking of someone who was standing on the edge of something terrifying and didn't know whether to jump or run. About what? I asked. He looked at me, really looked, for the first time in 16 years, and he said, about Mother, about the tests, about what she's been doing, what she's been making me do, what she's been making all of us do. He paused, his voice dropped to a whisper. I found something, Ethan, in her study, something that changes everything, something that I think you need to see. He held out his hand, a photograph, not my mother's photograph, not the cottage, not the garden. Different photograph, a building, tall, concrete, windowless, surrounded by a fence topped with barbed wire, and on the back in my stepmother's precise, controlled handwriting, 247 Westbrook Lane, Phase 2 ready for expansion. I looked at Marcus, I looked at the photograph, I looked at the address that matched my mother's key, my mother's note, my mother's desperate hope for rescue, and I felt the world shift beneath my feet, not just the ledger of revenge, not just the ledger of rescue. But something new, something terrible, something that made me realize that my stepmother's empire was larger than I had imagined, that her cruelty was deeper than I had known, that her reach extended far beyond our family, our city, our understanding of what evil could accomplish. Marcus was looking at me with eyes that were not cruel but frightened, not contemptuous but desperate, not the eyes of a golden boy but the eyes of a prisoner who had finally seen the bars of his cage. "Ethan," he whispered. "What is that place? What is Phase 2, and why?" He paused, his voice broke. "Why does Mother have a file with your mother's name in it?" Chapter 6. The boardroom smelled the same as before: old wood, older politics, the particular dust of decisions made by people who would never face consequences. But this time the chairs were fuller. Word had spread. A golden boy about to confess. A family about to crack. The audience wanted blood and they didn't care whose. I sat in the back row. Same seat, same shadows. But different now. Marcus had seen me here, knew where I watched, and his eyes kept drifting to my corner like a compass needle seeking north. Mrs. Patterson sat at the center table. She wore the same navy dress, but something had shifted in her posture. Straighter, lighter, the look of a woman who had already lost her job, her reputation, her place in the world, and discovered she could survive without them. The chairman called the meeting to order. His voice cracked on the word order, like even he knew this was theater, not governance. "Whitfield has requested additional time to present new evidence regarding her son's academic integrity. However, before we proceed, Marcus Whitfield has asked to address the board." Marcus stood, his blazer was pressed, his hair was combed, his hands were steady. Only I could see the tremor, slight, hidden, the same tremor Julian Vance had carried, the same tremor of a man who had seen the cage and couldn't pretend anymore. "Members of the board," he said, his voice carried, not loud but clear, the voice of a golden boy who had spent his life being heard. "I need to tell you about my grades, about my tests, about the tutors my mother hired and the answers they provided and the lies I've told." The doors burst open. My stepmother entered like a storm in silk. 2 police officers flanked her, hands on belts, eyes scanning the room for threats that didn't exist. Behind them, a man in a suit I didn't recognize carried a briefcase that clicked when he set it down, the sound of locks, of evidence, of traps springing shut. "Forgive the interruption," my stepmother said. She didn't sound apologetic. She sounded victorious. "But I have evidence that casts serious doubt on my son's mental state and on the influence that has been exerted upon him." She pointed at Marcus, then at me. "These boys broke into a private medical facility last night. They stole confidential patient records. They are mentally unstable, dangerous." She paused, letting the words settle like dust on a coffin. "I have security footage." Man in the suit opened his briefcase. He pulled out a photograph, large, glossy, professionally printed. He held it up. There we were, Marcus and me, standing in the records room at 247 Westbrook Lane. Holding my mother's file, the concrete walls behind us, the shelves of names, the fluorescent light that turned our faces the color of corpses. A photograph that shouldn't exist, a room with no cameras. I had checked. I had looked for the telltale red lights, the black domes, the reflections in glass that betrayed surveillance. Nothing. The facility was designed to be invisible, unrecorded, unprovable. And yet someone had been watching, someone who knew we would come. Someone who wanted us to find exactly what we found, exactly when we found it. The machine didn't just swallow people. It planned, it waited, it let you think you were winning. "Ethan Whitfield," my stepmother said, and my name in her mouth was a curse, a diagnosis, a death sentence. "My stepson, a troubled boy, obsessed with his mother's death, convinced she's alive. He has been unwell for years, secret journals, paranoid delusions, and now he has infected my son with his madness." She pulled out another photograph, my notebook open on my bed, the pages visible, the handwriting mine filling every line. Entry 1, the ledger of debts. Entry 4, the test. Marcus scored 100%. Entry 8, she's here. Phase 2. Entry 10, Marcus is going to confess. She had photographed my notebook, my private thoughts, my plans, my ledger. The violation was physical, like a hand in my chest, pulling out something I had kept hidden even from myself. "These are the writings of a disturbed mind," she said. "A boy who believes he died and was reborn, who believes he can predict the future, who has convinced my son, my vulnerable, impressionable son, to join him in a fantasy of persecution and revenge." Room was silent. The board members looked at me, not with suspicion, with pity, the worst kind of look, the look that says you are broken and we are glad we are not you. Mrs. Patterson stood. "This is irrelevant," she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. "Whether Ethan Whitfield is troubled or not, it doesn't change the fact that Marcus cheated, that I have evidence, that this family has engaged in systematic academic fraud." My stepmother smiled, the same smile, the one that didn't reach her eyes. "Mrs. Patterson," she said, and her voice was honey and arsenic, "your evidence is a test with a false answer. A clever trap, certainly, but traps can be baited, and bait can be planted." She pulled out another paper from her briefcase. "This is a sworn statement from Julian Vance. He admits that he planted the false answer in the stolen test key, that he did so at your request, that you paid him to create this incident to discredit my son." She held it up. Julian's signature, Julian's confession, Julian's betrayal, but Julian was in Dimitri's debt. Julian was terrified. Julian had handed me a folder of secrets in a coffee shop at 8:00 p.m., shaking, desperate, willing to do anything to survive. And now he had signed a statement saying I was the fraud, that Mrs. Patterson was the conspirator, that my stepmother was the victim, Dimitri, the name on the phone, the debt collector, the man I had called to pressure Julian. Had he been working for her all along? Had the entire meeting, the coffee shop, the folder, the trembling left hand been staged? The machine was larger than I knew. Its gears turned in directions I hadn't imagined. It didn't just crush people, it recruited them, turned them, used their desperation against them until they served its purpose without knowing they served. Mrs. Patterson, the chairman said. His voice was different now. Softer, regretful. Voice of a man who had made his decision and wanted to be done with it. Given these new developments, given the evidence of conspiracy, I'm afraid we have no choice but to suspend our investigation into Marcus's academic record and to initiate a separate inquiry into your conduct. Patterson sat down hard, the chair creaked, her face went grey. I stood up, the back row, the shadows, the place where no one looked because nothing ever happened. She's lying, I said, my voice was small. 16 years old, servant soft, the voice of furniture, but it carried every word, the facility, the records. My mother, she's alive, she's in there, phase 2, I saw her file, I saw. Ethan, my stepmother said, not angry, concerned. The perfect performance of maternal worry. Please, don't do this to yourself, don't embarrass yourself further, we can get you help, good doctors, the best care. But first you need to admit that none of this is real, that your mother is dead, that she died in 2008, that you watched her funeral. I had not watched her funeral, I had been kept home. Too upsetting for a child, the staff had told me. The same staff who cooked my meals and washed my clothes and never looked me in the eye. But I didn't say that, because in the silence that followed my stepmother's words I heard something. A sound from the doorway, a movement, a presence that hadn't been there before. I turned, a woman stood in the frame, tall, thin, hair shaved close to the scalp. Eyes that were not vacant, not empty, but filled with a fire that had survived years of burning. She wore a white coat, a doctor's coat. The kind my stepmother's oncologist partner might have worn, the kind that gave authority, that commanded attention, that turned a prisoner into a professional. But underneath the coat I saw the tracks on her arms, the same tracks from the photograph, my mother, alive, standing in the doorway of the boardroom where her son was being called mad, where her husband sat silent, where the woman who had imprisoned her smiled with the confidence of someone who had never lost a game she controlled. Clarissa, my mother said, her voice was rough, unused, the voice of someone who had not spoken in years or who had spoken only when forced, only when punished, only when the machine demanded performance. You forgot one thing, she said. My stepmother's smile faltered, for the first time. A crack, a hairline fracture in the perfect porcelain. You forgot, my mother continued, walking into the room, her white coat brushing against the board members who shrank back, who didn't know what they were seeing, who sensed something terrible and ancient and unstoppable, that phase 2 has an exit protocol. For patients who prove cooperative, who perform well, who demonstrate that the treatment has succeeded. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a phone. A small, cheap phone, the kind that couldn't be traced, the kind that prisoners smuggled, the kind that connected to the world outside the concrete walls. And you forgot, she said, that I have been cooperative for 15 years, that I have performed every role you assigned. Patient, prisoner, ghost, that I have earned your trust so completely that you let me walk out of that facility today, alone, unescorted, because you believed I was cured. She held up the phone, the screen was on. Recording playing, my stepmother's voice, clear and cold and unmistakable. The facility requires family signatures, for intake, for transfer, for disposal. If a family member signs, there's no investigation, no questions, just a sick relative who didn't make it. Room was silent, my stepmother's face had changed. The crack had widened, the porcelain was shattering, revealing something underneath that was not beautiful, not controlled, but raw and desperate and cornered. That's not, she started. Your voice, my mother said, your words, your confession, recorded yesterday, in your office, where you thought you were safe, where you thought no one could hear. She looked at me for the first time in 8 years, in 16 years, in a lifetime of separation and silence and the particular cruelty of families that eat their own. Ethan, she said, and her voice was different now, not rough, not unused, but warm, alive. The voice from the lunchbox notes, the birthday cards, the bedtime stories before the cancer, before the lie, before everything. I told you to find me, she said, and you did. She walked to me through the boardroom, through the silence, through the shattered remains of my stepmother's perfect world. She stopped in front of me, she reached out, she touched my face, her hand was cold, thin. Marked with scars that I didn't recognize, that told stories I couldn't imagine, that spoke of years in a room with white walls and no windows and the particular madness of being erased while still breathing. But it was her hand, her touch, her. Taller, she said, and she smiled, the smile from the photograph, the smile from my memory. The smile that had survived 8 years of imprisonment, of erasure, of the machine's attempt to turn her into nothing. I didn't cry, I had forgotten how. But I felt something crack inside me. Not the cold thing, not the ledger, not the weapon I had forged in death and rebirth, something else, something that might have been a boy, a son, someone who had once been loved and had spent 10 years believing that love was a lie, only to discover that it had been fighting for him all along, in rooms with white walls and no windows, in the darkest place the machine could build. Mom, I said, the word was small, broken. The word of a child who had been told his mother was dead, who had scrubbed floors and cooked meals and died with a knife in his chest, who had been reborn not for revenge but for this, for her, for the touch of a hand that remembered his face. The police officers moved, not toward me, not toward my mother, toward my stepmother, because in the silence while we stood there, mother and son, touching for the first time in 8 years, someone had made a call. Someone had sent the recording. Someone had activated the protocol that my mother had spent 15 years preparing, 15 years pretending, 15 years being cooperative and performing and earning the trust of a machine that didn't understand that patience was a weapon too. My stepmother stood, frozen, her perfect suit, her perfect hair, her perfect smile, shattered into pieces on the floor. Whitfield, one officer said. You are under arrest for kidnapping, false imprisonment, medical fraud and conspiracy to commit murder. She didn't resist, she didn't speak, she just looked at my mother. At me, at the two people she had tried to erase, who had survived her machine, who had found each other in the wreckage of her empire. And for a moment, just a flicker in the destruction, I saw something in her eyes that wasn't rage or contempt or the cold calculation of a woman who had never lost. I saw fear, the same fear Marcus had shown in my doorway at 11:47 p.m., the same fear I had carried for 10 years. The fear of a prisoner who had finally seen the bars of her own cage. The room emptied slowly, board members filing out, whispering, already rewriting the narrative in their minds, not a golden family and a mad servant boy, but a conspiracy of silence and a mother's love that had outlasted concrete walls and barbed wire and 15 years of erasure. Mrs. Patterson stopped at the door. She looked back at me, at my mother, at the two of us standing in the center of the room, still touching, still afraid to let go, still not quite believing that the world had finally turned right side up. Thank you, she said, and she left. Marcus was the last to go. He stood in the doorway, his blazer wrinkled, his golden life in ruins around him, his hands empty of everything except the file he had stolen, the file of his real mother, Clarissa Vance, patient, prisoner, ghost. Ethan, he said. I looked at him. My mother, he said. The real one, she's still in there, phase 2, even if your mom got out. The others didn't. The machine is still running. He was right, the arrest was one gear, one piece. The machine was larger than my stepmother, older than her empire, fed by other families, other signatures, other forms signed by children who didn't know what they were agreeing to. Then we keep going, I said. My mother squeezed my hand. Her grip was weak but certain. The grip of someone who had learned that strength wasn't about holding on tight, but about refusing to let go. We keep going, she repeated. And for the first time, the ledger felt less like a weapon and more like a promise. We walked out of the boardroom together, mother and son, ghost and ghost, two people who had been erased and had refused to stay gone. The sun was setting. The sky was the color of fire, of destruction, of the world ending and beginning again. My father's car was in the parking lot. He sat in the driver's seat, head on the steering wheel, not moving, not drinking, just existing in the space between the life he had chosen and the truth he had finally been forced to see. I didn't approach him. That was a different ledger. A different debt for a different day. My mother and I walked to the bus stop. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. We had 15 years to catch up on. 15 years of silence and suffering and the particular miracle of survival. We would talk eventually. We would cry eventually. We would learn each other again, slowly, carefully, like two people rebuilding a house from ashes. But not yet. For now, we just walked, side by side. Alive that night, in a motel room paid for with the last of my savings from years of hidden tips and stolen change, I opened my notebook. I turned to a fresh page, and I wrote, Entry 11, she's here, she's real, she's alive. I paused. Then, the ledger is not closed. The machine is still running. Phase 2 still holds prisoners, including Marcus's mother, including hundreds of others whose families signed forms they didn't raid, paid debts they didn't owe, believed lies they were desperate to believe. Another pause. But tonight I am not writing debts, I am writing gratitude. To a woman who spent 15 years being cooperative so she could walk out of hell. To a son, me, who refused to become furniture. To a brother, Marcus, who chose truth over gold. I closed the notebook. I looked at my mother, sleeping on the other bed, her shaved head on the pillow, her scarred arms curled around her chest, her breathing steady and deep and alive. I turned off the light. And I slept for the first time in 10 years, without dreams of knives, without clocks ticking toward 11:47 p.m., without the weight of a ledger pressing against my chest. Just sleep, just peace, just the impossible, beautiful, fragile fact of being alive. Chapter 7. Marcus didn't speak on the bus ride to the cottage. He sat by the window, forehead pressed against the glass, watching the city shrink into suburbs, then fields, then the kind of nowhere that doesn't appear on maps. I sat beside him, close enough to stop him if he ran, far enough that he didn't feel trapped. He hadn't asked where we were going. He just followed me out of the house, down the stairs, into the night, like a sleepwalker. Like a man who had already made his choice and was simply waiting to see where it led. The bus driver didn't look at us. Two boys in school blazers, carrying nothing, going nowhere at 11 p.m. Not his problem. We got off at the last stop. A crossroads with a flickering streetlight and a sign pointing to towns that didn't exist anymore. I led Marcus down a dirt path, through a gate that squealed, past a garden that had swallowed any pretense of order. The cottage was dark. No lights in the windows. The cat was gone or sleeping or simply didn't care. I knocked nothing. I knocked again harder. The door opened a crack. Amber eyes in the gap. The woman, my mother's friend, the keeper of ashes, studied me, then Marcus, then the space between us where something unspoken had settled like dust. You brought him, she said. He needs to see. She stepped back, let us in. Didn't offer tea this time. Just stood against the wall, arms crossed, watching Marcus the way you watch a fire that might spread. Marcus walked to the kitchen table. The photographs were still there, my mother in the garden, my father in the shadows, the cottage with its wildflowers and its secrets. He picked one up, held it to the light. His hands shook. That's her, he said, not a question. Your mother, the one who died, supposedly died. He set the photograph down, picked up another, then another. Moving faster now, like a man eating, like a man drowning, like a man who had been starved of truth and was suddenly surrounded by it. She looks like you, he said finally. The eyes, the way she holds her head, like she's waiting for someone to hit her but she won't flinch. I said nothing. Marcus turned to me. His face was wet. I hadn't seen him cry. Not when his dog died. Not when he failed his driving test 3 times. Not when his father forgot his birthday for the 5th year running. Ethan, he said, that place in the photograph, 247 Westbrook, I know it. Room went still. The woman stopped breathing. The clock on the wall, a different clock, cheaper but still ticking, seemed to slow. I asked. Mother took me there once when I was 12. He wiped his face with his sleeve, leaving a streak of snot and shame. She said it was a hospital for people who were too sick for normal hospitals. She said my grandmother was there, her mother. That she'd been sick for years and we couldn't visit because it would upset her. He laughed, a broken sound, like stepping on glass. But there was no grandmother. I'd never heard of a grandmother. And the building, it didn't look like a hospital. No windows, no ambulances, just a gate and guards and a smell. He shuddered, like cleaning products, like they were trying to cover something up. He sat down hard, the chair creaked. She made me sign something, a form. I was 12. I didn't read it. She said it was for the visitor log. But now, he looked at me. Now I think it was something else, something that made me complicit, that made me part of it without knowing. Woman spoke for the first time. The facility requires family signatures, for intake, for transfer, she paused, for disposal. If a family member signs, there's no investigation, no questions, just a sick relative who didn't make it, a quiet funeral, a closed file. Marcus put his head in his hands. I signed, he whispered. I signed something, I don't know what, but I signed. I watched him, this boy who had kicked me, cut me, killed me. This golden boy with his perfect grades and his purchased life and his hands that had held a knife at 11:47 p.m. He looked small now, smaller than me. Smaller than the servant boy who scrubbed his floors and cooked his meals and died in his kitchen, not because he was weak. Because he was finally seeing the cage, the same cage I had lived in, just gilded, just warmer, just with better food and softer pillows and the illusion that the door was open when it had been locked from the start. Marcus, I said. He didn't look up. Marcus. Harder this time. He raised his head, eyes red, nose running, the face of a child who had just learned that monsters were real and they looked like his mother. That form you signed, I said. Do you remember the date? He blinked. What, the date? On the form, do you remember? He stared at me. Then his eyes changed. Something flickered. A memory surfacing, fighting through years of suppression and privilege and the deliberate forgetting that wealthy children learn like a second language. March, he said slowly. March 15th. She made a joke about it, the Ides of March, she said. She said it was fitting, that some things should die on the day that Caesar died. March 15th, 2011, the same date on my mother's photograph. The same date she had escaped, or been moved, or been hidden, or been erased more thoroughly than before. I looked at the woman. She looked back, her face was stone. Your mother was there, I said to Marcus. At the facility on that day, the same day you signed a form you didn't read, the same day my mother supposedly died but didn't. I walked to the table. I picked up the photograph of my mother in the garden. I held it in front of his face. Look at her, Marcus. Look at her eyes. Look at her smile. This is what your mother tried to erase. This is what your family paid to hide. This is what you signed away without knowing. He looked, he really looked, and something broke in him, not dramatically, not with tears or shouting or the theatrical collapse of a golden boy discovering his throne was built on bones, just a small break, a hairline fracture, the kind of break that doesn't show immediately but weakens the foundation, that makes the whole structure vulnerable to the next storm. I didn't know, he said. I believe you. I would have. Stopped her, told someone, refused to sign. I set the photograph down. You were 12, Marcus. You were a child, and she was your mother, and she had already spent 10 years teaching you that she was God and you were nothing without her. I paused. You couldn't have stopped her, any more than I could have stopped her from turning me into furniture, any more than my father could have stopped her from taking my mother. She's not a person, Marcus. She's a system, a machine, and machines don't stop because children cry. He was quiet for a long time. Then, "What do we do?" I looked at the woman. She shook her head slightly, a warning, a caution, a reminder that some paths once taken couldn't be untaken. "We go to the facility," I said. "We use the key, we find the records, and we see what's really there." Tonight, Marcus stood. He wiped his face. He straightened his blazer, the same blazer his mother had bought him, the same blazer that marked him as a Whitfield, as golden, as belonging to a world that ate people like me and spat out the bones. Then he took it off, he folded it. Carefully, neatly. Way a servant folds clothes, the way I had folded his shirts for 10 years. He set it on the table. Underneath, he was just a boy, pale, thin, scared. The same boy he had been at 12, before the form, before the signature, before the machine had claimed him completely. "Not going back," he said. "Not to her, not to that house, not to being golden." He looked at me. "I don't know what I am without it, but I know I can't be that anymore." I nodded. I didn't trust him. Not completely, not yet. The ledger had taught me that trust was a currency that bought only disappointment, that every kindness carried interest, that every alliance was temporary until the debt came due. But I needed him, for the facility, for the records, for the signature that might open doors that my key couldn't. And maybe, just maybe, because some part of me, the part that had died at 11:47 p.m. and been reborn with a mother's hope pressed against my heart, wanted to believe that even Marcus Whitfield could be more than his mother's machine. "We leave in 10 minutes, I said. "The woman will drive us, she knows the way." "I don't know the way," the woman said. "You know the area, the back roads, the places that don't appear on maps." I looked at her. "You helped my mother escape. You know how to move without being seen." She didn't deny it, just picked up her keys from the counter and walked to the door. Marcus and I followed. The night swallowed us whole. The facility appeared at 1:47 am. Not suddenly, we saw the lights first, a glow on the horizon that didn't belong to stars or houses or anything natural. Then the fence, then the gate, then the building itself, rising from the flat land like a concrete fist, windowless, featureless, designed to be forgotten. The woman stopped the car a quarter-mile away. We walked the rest. The fence was higher than it looked in photographs. The barbed wire was new, glinting in the moonlight. The gate had a keypad, a camera, a sign that said private property in letters that didn't invite questions. I pulled out the key. It was small in my hand. Ridiculous almost, this tiny brass thing against a fortress of concrete and steel. The key to the east wing, my mother had written. The records are there. I walked along the fence, Marcus behind me, the woman behind him, until I found a door I hadn't seen from the road. Small, rusted, overgrown with weeds that had been trained by neglect to hide what they covered. The key fit. The lock turned with a sound like a bone breaking. The door opened. The corridor beyond was narrow. Concrete walls, concrete floor. A smell that was exactly what Marcus had described. Cleaning products, industrial, aggressive, the smell of something trying to erase itself. We walked in single file, me first, then Marcus. Then the woman, her hand in her pocket, gripping something I couldn't see. The corridor turned left, then right, then opened into a larger space, a room with shelves, files, boxes labeled with dates and names and numbers that didn't mean anything yet. The records. I walked to the nearest shelf, pulled out a box, opened it. Files, hundreds of them, each with a photograph, a name, a date of intake, a date of something else. Some had both dates filled in. Some had only the first, the second left blank, waiting. I found my mother's file, Elena Whitfield. Intake, September 14, 2008. Method, voluntary commitment, false. Discharge, March 15, 2011. Method, escaped. Underneath, in a different handwriting, someone had added, March 22, 2011. Transferred to phase 2, the same phrase from my stepmother's file. The same building Marcus had visited. The same form he had signed. I turned the page and found a photograph. Not my mother, not the cottage, not the garden, a room, white walls, no windows, a bed with straps, a chair with restraints, and in the chair, barely recognizable, barely human, was a woman who might have been my mother once. Hair shaved, eyes vacant, arms marked with tracks that could have been needles or could have been something worse. The date on the photograph, March 20, 2011, 5 days after her escape. 5 days after the cottage, the garden, the smile, 5 days after she had been free. I stared at the photograph. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel grief. I felt nothing, a perfect hollow nothing, like the room in the photograph, like the building around us, like the machine that had done this and kept doing it and would keep doing it until someone stopped it. "Ethan," Marcus whispered. I didn't answer. "Ethan, we need to go. Someone's coming." I heard it then. Footsteps, distant but approaching. The sound of guards, of orderlies, of the machine's immune system responding to infection. I closed the file. I put it back in the box. I turned to Marcus and the woman. I said, and we ran. The corridor was longer going back. The turns confused. The smell of cleaning products grew stronger, mixed now with something else, sweat, fear, the particular odor of people who had been running too long. We reached the door. The woman went through first, Marcus second. I paused at the threshold, looking back at the shelves, the files, the thousands of names that no one remembered, the thousands of lives that had been reduced to boxes and photographs and dates. I pulled out my notebook. I wrote one line fast in the dark. Entry 9, she's here. Phase 2, alive but not living. I will come back. I will burn it down. But first I will survive. Ran. The night air hit like a slap. Cold, real, alive. We ran to the car. The woman started it without lights. We drove in darkness on dirt roads, through fields that swallowed the sound of the engine. No one followed, or if they did, they let us go, because we were small, because we were children. Because the machine didn't fear children who ran, it feared children who came back with matches. I sat in the back seat, Marcus beside me, both of us breathing hard, both of us smelling of concrete and fear and the particular dust of places where people disappeared. Marcus reached into his pocket. Pulled out something I hadn't seen him take, a file, not my mother's. Another one, he opened it. Held it to the light of a passing street lamp as we reached the edge of the city, a photograph of a woman. Young, dark hair, eyes that looked like mine, like my mother's, like something that had been passed down through blood and silence and the particular cruelty of families that ate their own. The name on the file, Clarissa Vance, Marcus's mother. Intake date, 6 months before Marcus was born. Discharge date, never. Status, phase 2, permanent. Marcus looked at me, I looked at him, and in his eyes, in the red-rimmed, tear-streaked, broken eyes of the boy who had killed me, I saw something that hadn't been there before. Not rage, not revenge, just understanding. The understanding that we were both children of the machine. Both products of a system that erased women and replaced them with something else. Both fighting to survive in a world that had decided we were useful only as long as we stayed quiet. She's not my mother, Marcus said. His voice was flat, empty, the voice of a boy who had just discovered that his entire life was built on a substitution, a replacement, a lie. The woman who raised me, Clarissa, she's not, she was never. He couldn't finish, I finished for him. She was a patient, like my mother, like all of them. The machine took her identity, gave her yours. Made her into something she wasn't, so she could make you into something you weren't. I paused. Your real mother is in there, Marcus. In phase 2, alive but not living, like mine. He closed the file, he put it back in his pocket, and he didn't speak for the rest of the ride. The woman dropped us at a bus stop 3 miles from the Whitfield mansion. Go home, she said. Pretend, be furniture, be golden, until you're ready. Ready for what? Marcus asked. She didn't answer. Just drove away, her taillights disappearing into the dark, leaving us alone at a bus stop in a city that didn't know we existed. We walked home, side by side, not speaking, not touching. 2 boys who had been enemies, who had been master and servant, who had been killer and killed, now bound by something deeper than hatred. The understanding that we were both ghosts, that we were both fighting the same machine. That the ledger had room for more than one name. We reached the house at 4:30 a.m. The lights were on in my stepmother's study. She was waiting, not for us, for something else. For a phone call perhaps, for news of intruders at her facility. For confirmation that the machine was still running, still swallowing, still erasing. Marcus walked to the stairs, paused, turned back. Ethan, he said. I looked at him. Tomorrow, the board meeting, the one about Mrs. Patterson. He took a breath. I'm going to tell the truth, about the tests, about Julian, about everything. I'm going to stand up in front of everyone and say that I cheated, that my mother paid for it, that Mrs. Patterson was right. He waited for my reaction. I gave him none. Be destroyed, I said. Your golden life, your college prospects, your mother's protection, all of it gone. I know. She'll disown you, cut you off, maybe worse. I know. Looked at me, really looked. The way he had looked at the photograph of my mother, the way he had looked at the file of his own, with eyes that were finally seeing something beyond the reflection of his own perfection. Because, he said, I signed a form when I was 12. I didn't know what it was, but I signed it, and that makes me part of this, part of the machine, part of, he stopped, swallowed, part of what happened to your mother, to my mother, to all of them. He turned, walked up the stairs. At the top he paused. And because, he said, not turning around, you were right, about what you said in my room. I'm not real, I've never been real, but maybe I can be. He disappeared into the darkness of the upper floor. I stood in the hallway, the clock on the wall ticked. 4:47 am not 11:47 p.m. A different time. A different death, a different choice. I walked to my room, I locked the door, I opened my notebook, and I wrote, Entry 10, Marcus is going to confess. Tomorrow. In public, he will destroy himself to save Mrs. Patterson, to hurt the machine, to become something other than golden. I paused then. I don't know if he's doing it for me, for his real mother, for himself, or because he has no other choice, because once you see the cage, you can't unsee it, and living inside it becomes impossible. I closed the notebook. I lay on my bed. I didn't sleep. I waited for morning, and for whatever would come with it. Chapter 8. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and fear. My father sat in the witness box, his suit hanging loose where drinking had melted the weight off him, his hands clasped so tight the knuckles showed white. He hadn't looked at my stepmother since entering. His eyes kept finding my mother in the gallery, then darting away, like he couldn't bear what he saw and couldn't stop looking. The prosecutor was a woman named Helen Voss. 50, sharp-shouldered, with the patience of someone who had learned that justice was not a lightning bolt but a slow leak, wearing away stone one drop at a time. Mr. Whitfield, she said, when did you first learn that your wife, Elena, was alive after her supposed death in 2008? My father's throat worked. He reached for the water glass mist, caught it with a trembling hand. The sound of ice rattling filled the silence. March 2009, he said. 6 months after the funeral, I received a letter, no return address, just a photograph. Elena standing in front of a building I didn't recognize, and a note, they're lying to you, find me. Set the glass down without drinking. I didn't find her. I was drinking then, heavily. I could barely function. Clarissa, my second wife, she handled everything. The company, the house, he paused. The boy, me, the boy, the furniture. And when did you discover the truth about the facility? My father's hands tightened on the railing of the witness box. The wood creaked. 2010. I followed Clarissa. She went to 247 Westbrook Lane. I waited in the car. I saw patients being moved, in wheelchairs, with restraints, not sick people, not people receiving treatment, people being. He stopped, swallowed, stored like inventory, like things. Courtroom was silent. Even the reporters had stopped typing. My stepmother sat at the defense table, her orange jumpsuit a color she would have called vulgar in another life, her face a mask that was finally cracking under the weight of too many performances. Did you confront her? No. My father's voice was barely audible. I was afraid. She had evidence of my drinking, of other things. She said if I challenged her, she would expose me, destroy the company, take Marcus, and she would send Alina back to phase 2. Permanently, he looked at my mother again. This time he didn't look away. So I made a deal. I would marry her. I would give her access to everything. I would become what she wanted. In exchange, Alina would live. She would remain in the facility, but she would not be disposed of. She would be, he laughed, a broken sound, preserved, like a specimen, like a memory of what I had lost. My mother's hand found mine in the gallery. Her grip was hard, her palm rough with scars, but her fingers interlaced with mine like they had done this 1,000 times before in another life, before the cancer and the lie and the machine. Ethan, the prosecutor asked. Your son, what did you do to protect him? My father's face changed. Something collapsed in it, some final wall that had been holding back the flood. Nothing, he whispered. I did nothing, Clarissa said. She said if I showed him attention, if I treated him like a son, he would become suspicious. He would ask questions. He would look for his mother. So I withdrew. I drank. I made myself absent. I told myself it was protection. That by ignoring him, by letting Clarissa reduce him to furniture, I was keeping him safe, keeping him small, keeping him invisible enough to survive. He looked at me for the first time in 8 years. Maybe longer. Ethan, he said. Not to the prosecutor, not to the court, to me. I watched you, every day, from my office window, from my car, from the doorway of rooms I was too afraid to enter. I watched you cook and clean and shrink yourself into nothing. And I told myself it was necessary, that the alternative, that Clarissa deciding you were a threat, that you needed to be silenced, that you needed to be. He stopped. I told myself that a living ghost was better than a dead son. The words hung in the air. A living ghost better than dead. The math of a father who had chosen absence over action, complicity over resistance, slow erosion over sudden death. I felt my mother's grip tighten. Not in anger, in recognition. She had made her own calculations in that white room, had performed cooperation to survive, had traded dignity for breath. We were all accountants in the ledger of the machine, all balancing debts we hadn't chosen. Mr. Whitfield, the prosecutor said. Her voice was gentler now. The gentleness of someone who knew she had one who could afford mercy. Did you ever help Alina escape? My father nodded. 2011, March, I found the key, the address of the cottage. A contact, a friend from Alina's college. I arranged everything, I thought if she was free I could find a way to follow, to start over, to be the man I had been before. He looked down at his hands. Clarissa found out. Within a week, she had contacts in the facility. People who owed her. She recaptured Alina, moved her to phase 2, and she made me watch the security footage, so I would know, so I would understand, that there was no escape, that the machine was larger than me, that my love was not enough. He looked up. She was wrong, he said. My love was enough, it just wasn't the right kind. It wasn't brave, it wasn't loud, it wasn't the love that fights, it was the love that hides, that waits, that hopes someone else will be strong enough. His eyes found mine again. And you were, he said. You found her, you fought, you burned it down. The ledger, Ethan, it's not just yours, it's mine, and I'm ready to pay. The defense attorney stood. Young, expensive, the kind of lawyer who believed that enough money could polish any turd into a diamond. Mr. Whitfield, he said, you claim you were manipulated, coerced, a victim of Clarissa Whitfield's schemes, and yet you married her, you gave her your company. You let her raise your son, Marcus, as her own. You let her destroy your first wife, ignore your second child, and build an empire of silence. How convenient that now, facing prison yourself, you recast yourself as a tragic hero. How convenient that your son, the furniture you ignored, has become your salvation, your get-out-of-jail-free card. He leaned forward. It possible, Mr. Whitfield, that you are simply trading one manipulation for another? That you are now using Ethan's story, his pain, his suffering, his miraculous rescue of his mother to save your own skin? My father was silent. The silence stretched. 10 seconds. 20. The courtroom held its breath. Then my father smiled, not the smile of a man who had won. The smile of a man who had lost everything and discovered that losing was not the end. Yes, he said. The defense attorney blinked. Yes, my father repeated. I am using him. I am using his story, his pain. His strength, because it is the only thing I have left, the only currency that matters, the only debt I can pay. He turned to look at my stepmother. Clarissa taught me that, he said. She taught me that love is weakness, that family is leverage, that every relationship is a transaction. I learned her lessons too well. I became her student, her partner, her puppet. He turned back to the attorney. Ethan, he said, he learned different lessons. He learned them in kitchens and bedrooms and the particular hell of being invisible. He learned them without teachers, without books, without anyone to show him the way, and he became something neither Clarissa nor I could imagine. Something the machine couldn't break, something that could wait, that could plan, that could balance a ledger 15 years long. He stood, the bailiff moved to stop him, but the judge raised a hand. He became, my father said, the thing we feared most, not a victim, not a villain. A witness, someone who saw everything, remembered everything, refused to forget. And now he looked at me. He is making us remember too, making us pay, making us face what we did, what we became, what we let the machine turn us into. He sat down, the courtroom was silent, then my mother stood, she walked to the front, past the gallery, past the reporters, past the bailiff who moved to intercept her, then stopped, confused by her white coat, her authority, her bearing. She stood before the witness box, she looked at my father. You gave me the key, she said, her voice was rough, unused, but it carried. In 2011, you risked everything, you failed but you tried, that matters, she turned to the court. Ethan, she said, he didn't just try, he succeeded, he found me, he found the records, he found the truth, not because he was brave, not because he was strong, because he was patient, because he was invisible. Because he learned, as I learned, as we all learned, that the machine's greatest weakness is its arrogance. Its belief that the people it erases stay erased, that the furniture doesn't dream, that the ghosts don't remember. She turned to me. Ethan, she said, stand up. I stood, the courtroom looked at me, the furniture, the servant, the boy who had died at 11:47 p.m. and been reborn with a ledger. Tell them, my mother said, tell them what the ledger is, not a weapon, not a list of debts, tell them what you told me. In the motel, the first night, I looked at her, at my father. At Marcus, sitting in the back row, his golden life in ruins, his real mother's file clutched in his hands. Ledger, I said, and my voice was small, 16, servant soft, but it carried in the silence like a bell. Is a promise that the invisible will be seen, that the erased will be remembered, that the machine, I paused, doesn't win, not because we destroy it, but because we survive it, because we outlast it, because we refuse to become what it wants us to become. I sat down. My mother returned to her seat, the prosecutor looked at the judge looked at the ceiling, and my stepmother, Clarissa Whitfield, architect of the machine, builder of cages, destroyer of mothers and sons, finally spoke. May I address the court, she said, her voice was different, not the honey, not the arsenic, something flatter, something that had lost its music. The judge nodded, she stood, her chains rattled, she didn't look at my father, didn't look at me, didn't look at my mother. She looked at Marcus, her golden boy, her creation, the son she had stolen, not made. Marcus, she said, come here. He didn't move. Marcus, she repeated. I am still your mother, in the eyes of the law, in the records, in the signature you gave me when you were 12, I am your mother, and I am asking you, not commanding, not demanding, asking you to come here. Marcus stood, he walked to the front of the courtroom, past me, past my mother. To the defense table where the woman who had raised him sat in orange, her perfect hair dull under fluorescent lights, her perfect mask shattered beyond repair. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough to touch, far enough to be untouchable. What do you want? He asked. Want you to understand, she said. The facility, phase 2, it was not cruelty, it was necessity. The world is full of inconvenient people, sick relatives, embarrassing secrets, loose ends. I provided a service. A solution. I gave families peace, I gave them control, I gave them silence, Marcus said. The word was quiet, final, the word of a boy who had spent his life being loud and was only now discovering the power of quiet. You gave them silence, he repeated. You gave them erasure. You gave them the lie that their problems could disappear if they paid enough, and you made me part of it. You made me sign. You made me believe that I was golden, that I was special, that I deserved everything I had. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the file, his real mother's file, Clarissa Vance, patient, prisoner, ghost. You told me my grandmother was there, he said. You told me she was sick. You made me sign a form for a woman who didn't exist. And all the while my real mother, he held up the file, was in phase 2, being erased, being stored, being silenced, so you could take her place. So you could become my mother, so you could use me. He dropped the file on the table, it landed between them like a verdict. Choose him, Marcus said. Clarissa blinked. Marcus turned, looked at me. The furniture, the servant, the ghost, I choose him. Over you, over gold, over the lie. He walked back to his seat. He didn't look at her again. The judge called a recess. The courtroom emptied slowly, then quickly, then in a rush of whispers and flashes, and the particular hunger of people who had witnessed something they didn't understand but knew was important. I stayed in my seat, my mother stayed beside me, my father was led away by bailiffs, his testimony complete, his debt unpaid, his future uncertain. Marcus sat in the back row alone, his file on his lap, his golden life reduced to paper and ink, and the particular clarity of a boy who had finally chosen. My stepmother sat at the defense table motionless, her chains rattling when she breathed, her eyes fixed on the file Marcus had left behind. I opened my notebook, I wrote, Entry 12, the trial. My father spoke, my mother stood, Marcus chose, and my stepmother for the first time was seen, not as a monster, not as a machine, as a woman who built a fortress and discovered too late that she had locked herself inside. I paused, then, the ledger grows, not with debts but with names. Elena Whitfield, Marcus Vance, even Clarissa, even my father, all of them prisoners, all of them learning too late, too slow, too broken that the only escape is to stop building cages. I closed the notebook. My mother touched my shoulder. Come, she said, we have a motel room and I want to hear about your first life, the one where you died, the one where you were reborn, the one where you became the ledger. I looked at her. You believe me? I asked. About dying, about remembering. About the clock at 11:47 p.m. She smiled, the smile from the photograph, the smile that had survived 15 years. I believe, she said, that you survived, however you did it, whatever you call it, you survived and you found me and that is enough. We walked out of the courtroom together into the afternoon sun, into a world that was not fixed, not healed, not free of machines, but a world where the ghosts were visible, where the furniture had names. Where the ledger was not just a record of debts, but a map toward something else, something that might eventually become peace. Chapter 9. The motel room had 2 beds, a flickering TV, and a window that looked out at a parking lot where a single street lamp buzzed and died and buzzed again. My mother sat on the bed nearest the door, her back against the headboard, her knees drawn up, her scarred arms wrapped around her legs. She looked small, smaller than she had in the courtroom. White coat was gone, replaced by a sweatshirt I'd bought from a thrift store 3 blocks away. Without the costume of authority, she was just a woman who had spent 15 years in a room with no windows. I sat on the other bed. Notebook open, pen ready. Tell me, I said. She didn't look at me. She looked at the window, the street lamp, the parking lot empty except for a single car that had been there since we arrived. Phase 1 was a hospital, she said. Real doctors, real treatments. The kind of place where wealthy families sent relatives with embarrassing conditions, addiction, mental illness, pregnancy, conditions that couldn't be hidden but could be controlled. Clarissa worked there as a fundraiser. She saw the potential, the demand, the money. She reached for the water bottle on the nightstand. Her hand shook. She drank, set it down, wiped her mouth with the back of her wrist. Phase 2 was her innovation, not a hospital, a warehouse. No windows because windows mean witnesses. No doctors because doctors ask questions, just orderlies, guards, people who understood that their paycheck depended on silence, and patients who weren't patients anymore, who were inventory, assets, problems that had been paid to disappear. She looked at me. I was there for the transition. 2008 to 2011. Phase 1 was closing, Phase 2 opening. The move happened at night, trucks, restraints, the kind of logistics that Clarissa excelled at. She was proud of it. She showed me the plans, the expansion charts, the projections, growth models. My mother's voice was flat. She wasn't satisfied with one facility. She wanted 10, 20, a network. She called it the architecture. A franchise of erasure. Every city with wealthy families needed a place to store their inconvenient truths, and she would provide it. She stood, walked to the window, pressed her forehead against the glass, cold from the night outside. She had partners, she said. Investors. People who understood that silence was a commodity, that grief could be managed, that families would pay anything to avoid scandal, to avoid truth, to avoid looking at the people they had broken and admitting they were the ones who had broken them. She turned. They as someone above her, Ethan, someone who funded the expansion, who designed the business model, who recruited the investors and managed the legal protections and made sure that no matter what happened, no matter how many patients, how many families, how many signatures, the machine would keep running. Mother shook her head. I don't know. Clarissa called them the architect. Never a name, never a face, just phone calls, encrypted emails, wire transfers from shell companies. The architect designed the system. Clarissa managed it. And people like me, she touched her shaved head, her scarred arms. We were the product. She walked back to the bed. Sat down, her movements were careful, precise, the movements of someone who had learned that sudden gestures were punished, that visibility was dangerous, that even in freedom the habits of imprisonment died slowly. Architect knows about you, she said. I stopped writing. The machine has sensors, because every facility reports, because your stepmother, Clarissa, she wasn't just arrested. She was disconnected, cut off. The architect knows when pieces go missing, when ledgers stop balancing. When ghosts refuse to stay buried. She reached out, touched my notebook. The cover, worn from carrying, from hiding, from being pressed against my chest in moments of fear. They know about this, she said. They know about your entries, your plans, your patience. They know because Clarissa told them, because she was required to report, because the machine doesn't just swallow people, it learns from them. It adapts, it evolves. I looked at my notebook, the ledger, my weapon, my promise, my map. Coming, my mother said. Who? Cleaners, that's what Clarissa called them. People who fix problems, who remove obstacles, who make sure that the architecture remains intact. She paused. They'll come for me first. I'm the witness, the proof, the one who can connect Clarissa to the architect. Then they'll come for you, because you're the one who found me, who exposed the system, who proved that ghosts can fight back. She took my hand. Her grip was hard. Harder than it should have been for someone so thin, so scarred, so broken by years of chemical compliance and physical restraint. We need to run, she said. I pulled my hand away, not roughly, just enough. No, I said. Ethan, no. I stood. I walked to the window. I looked at the empty parking lot, the buzzing street lamp, the car that had been sitting there too long. I've been running my whole life from Marcus, from Clarissa, From the knife at 11:47 p.m., I died running. I was reborn running. I'm done. I turned. I have the key, the address, the records from the facility. I have Marcus. I have Mrs. Patterson. I have a father who is finally talking and a mother who is finally free. I paused. I have a ledger and I'm going to use it. How I sat back down, I opened the notebook to a fresh page. I wrote entry 13, the architect, unknown, powerful, connected, coming. Then I looked at my mother. We find them, I said, not by running, by walking in. By using the system against itself. By becoming the kind of problem that the machine can't solve. The kind of ghost that won't stay buried. The kind of witness that multiplies faster than they can silence. I tapped the pen against the paper. Marcus has a signature, I said, on a form he signed when he was 12, a form for a grandmother who didn't exist, a form that connects him to the facility, to Clarissa, to the machine. My mother nodded slowly. And your father, she said, he has records. Financial, the wire transfers, the shell companies, the payments that funded the architecture. You, I said, you have the patient records, the names, the dates, the proof that hundreds of people were erased, that families paid for silence, that the machine has been running for 15 years. I wrote again, the ledger is not a weapon, it's an invitation to every family who paid, to every patient who survived. To every person who signed a form they didn't read and wondered, years later, what had really happened to their inconvenient relative. Looked up, we publish it, I said, all of it, not to the police are part of the system, paid by the machine, protected by the architecture. Not to the newspapers are owned by the same investors who fund the facilities. We publish it to the families, to the signers. The people who thought they were buying silence and discovered too late that they were buying complicity. My mother was quiet then, they'll kill us, probably, you're 16. I'm 26, I said. I died at 26. I was reborn at 16. I'm whatever age I need to be to finish this. She smiled, small, tired, the smile of a woman who had spent 15 years performing cooperation and was only now learning how to perform defiance. Your father, she said, he used to say that. Whatever age I need to be, before the drinking, before the absence, before Clarissa turned him into a puppet. She paused. He was brave once. I think you got that from him. The bravery and the patience and the terrible, stubborn refusal to let go. She stood. She walked to her bag, a plastic grocery bag, all she had in the world, and pulled out a phone. Cheap, prepaid, the kind that couldn't be traced. I kept this, she said. In the facility, hidden, for years. I used it once to call a journalist, I thought if the story got out, the machine would stop. The journalist disappeared. Not dead, just gone, transferred to a different city. A different job, a different life. The machine doesn't just erase patients, it erases anyone who threatens exposure. She set the phone on the bed between us. But before he disappeared, she said, he gave me a name. Someone who had been trying to find the architect for years. Someone who had lost family to the machine. Someone who understood that the only way to fight silence was with noise. She looked at me. Her name is Sue Jin. She runs a website, obscure, encrypted, dedicated to tracking missing persons who were never reported missing. The disappeared, the erased, the ones the machine swallowed. I picked up the phone, turned it over. Where is she? Seoul, my mother said, but she moves. She has to. The machine has tried to find her, to silence her. To add her to the inventory. She's still alive because she's careful, because she's patient. Because my mother smiled, she keeps a ledger of her own. I wrote in my notebook, entry 14, Sue Jin, Seoul, ledger keeper, target of the machine, potential ally. I closed the book, I looked at the window, the parking lot, the car that had been sitting too long. Then we go to Seoul, I said. My mother shook her head. I know the system, I know the codes, I know how to move without being seen. She touched my face, her palm was rough, warm, alive. You stay here, you finish the trial, you protect Marcus, you keep the ledger growing. And when I find Sujin, when I build the network, when we have enough voices to drown out the machine, then you come. I opened my mouth to argue. She pressed her finger to my lips, the first touch of a mother to her son in 8 years, not a gesture of control, of love. Lost you once, she said, to cancer that wasn't cancer. The funeral I didn't attend. To a life of servitude I couldn't save you from. I won't lose you again. Not to the architect, not to the cleaners, not to the machine. She picked up her bag, she walked to the door, she paused. Car in the parking lot, she said, not turning around. It arrived 20 minutes ago, 2 men's suits, the kind that don't wrinkle because they don't sit down. They're waiting for something, for confirmation, for orders, for the signal that it's time to clean. She looked back. Be here when they get it. She opened the door, the night air rushed in, cold and sharp and smelling of rain. Mom, I said. She stopped. See you again. A question, a promise. She smiled, the smile from the photograph. I know, she said, and she was gone. I waited 5 minutes. I packed my notebook, my pen, the prepaid phone my mother had left behind. I walked to the bathroom. I flushed the toilet. I ran the sink. Through the thin walls I heard movement in the parking lot, car doors, footsteps. The particular silence of men who had been trained to be quiet. I opened the bathroom window, small, narrow, designed to prevent entry, not exit. I squeezed through, dropped into the bushes, ran 3 blocks away. I stopped, bent over, hands on knees, breathing hard. The motel was behind me. The men in suits were behind me. My mother was ahead, somewhere in the night, moving towards Seoul and Sujin and the network of ledger keepers who refused to let the machine win. I straightened. I looked at the phone in my hand. I turned it on one contact, saved under M. I pressed call. It rang once. Ethan, my mother's voice, distant, compressed, already on a bus, a train, a path I couldn't follow. They came, I said. I know, keep moving, don't go home, don't go to Marcus, don't go anywhere the machine expects. Then, silence then, the cottage, the keeper of ashes, she has a car, supplies, a route that doesn't appear on maps. A pause, and Ethan, yes, the ledger. Don't stop writing, even when you're running, even when you're scared, especially then. The machine wants you silent, it wants you invisible, it wants you to disappear into fear and never resurface. Her voice grew softer. Give it what it wants. The line went dead. I looked at the phone. I looked at the street around me, empty. Dark, indifferent to the boy standing in a pool of streetlight with a notebook in his pocket and a dead woman's promise in his chest. I started walking, not running, walking, the pace of someone who had learned that survival was not about speed but about direction. Toward the cottage, toward the keeper of ashes, toward whatever came next. I reached the cottage at dawn. The garden was wet with dew. The cat was on the railing, both ears intact, watching me approach with the particular disinterest of creatures who had seen too much to be surprised by anything. The door opened before I knocked. The woman, my mother's friend, the keeper, looked at me. She didn't ask about my mother. She didn't ask about the men in suits. She just stepped aside and said, "You're late." I entered. The kitchen was different. The photographs were gone. The shelves were empty. In their place were boxes, bags. Particular clutter of someone preparing to leave. Running too, I said. Machine has a long memory, she said. And I'm on the list, have been for years. Your mother's escape bought me time. Her testimony bought me more, but time runs out. She handed me a set of keys. Car in the back, old, reliable, tank is full. Trunk has food, water, cash, not much, enough. Where do I go? South. There's a town, no name worth remembering. A man there, he calls himself the librarian. He collects stories like yours, ledgers, testimonies, evidence that the machine couldn't swallow. She paused. He'll know about Sujin. He'll know how to reach her, how to reach your mother. I took the keys. Why are you helping us? I asked. She smiled, small, sad, the smile of someone who had buried too much to be surprised by anything. Because your mother saved my sister, she said. 1987, college, your mother was pre-med. My sister was bleeding out in a dorm bathroom after a back alley procedure. Your mother found her, saved her, kept her secret, kept her alive. She touched my face, the same gesture as my mother, the same rough palm, the same warmth. Your mother collects debts, Ethan, not to collect them, to forgive them, to turn them into something else, into grace, into possibility, into the stubborn, beautiful refusal to let the machine win. She walked to the door, opened it. She said, "The cleaners are thorough, but they're slow. They check the obvious places first. Motels, bus stations, airports. They don't think to look in gardens, in cottages, in the spaces between the spaces." I walked out, paused at the gate. "What's your name?" I asked. She smiled again. "Keeper of Ashes doesn't have a name," she said. "Just a function, just a purpose, just the stubborn, beautiful refusal to let the fire die completely." She closed the door. I heard the lock turn. I walked to the car. It started on the third try. I drove south. The sun rose behind me. The road was empty, flat, stretching toward a horizon that didn't promise anything except more road. I opened my notebook at a stoplight in a town too small to have a name. I wrote, "Entry 15, alone, moving. The machine is close. The architect is closer. My mother is ahead, finding Sujin. I am behind, finding the librarian. Marcus is in the courtroom, holding the file of his real mother. My father is in a cell, paying debts he didn't know he owed." I paused. The light turned green. I didn't move. I wrote, "I don't know if I'll survive this. I don't know if any of us will. The machine is larger than I knew. The architect is smarter than I feared. And I am 16 years old, driving a stolen car toward a town that doesn't exist, carrying a notebook and a dead woman's promise." Another pause then, but I am also 26. I have died. I have been reborn. I have scrubbed floors and cooked meals and died with a knife in my chest and a clock on the wall. I have learned that the machine's greatest weakness is not strength, not violence, not even truth. I looked at the road ahead, empty, waiting. Its greatest weakness is patience. The patience of furniture, the patience of ghosts, the patience of a boy who died at 11:47 p.m. and woke up with a ledger and nothing but time. I closed the notebook. I drove. The sun climbed higher. The road stretched on. And somewhere behind me, in a courtroom, in a cell, in a cottage with a cat on the railing, the machine was calculating, adapting, preparing its next move. But I was calculating too, adapting, preparing, because the ledger was not closed, the game was not over, and the ghost was still writing. Chapter 10. The room smelled of paper and dust and something else, something that reminded me of my mother's cottage, of lavender and old books and the particular weight of memory pressed between pages. The shelves stretched upward into darkness, beyond the reach of the single bulb that hung from the ceiling, swaying slightly in a draft I couldn't feel. I stood in the doorway, notebook in my jacket, keys in my pocket, staring at the man with white eyes who claimed to have been waiting for me. "Close the door," he said. I didn't move. "Afraid," he said, "not a question, a diagnosis. Good, fear is information. Fear tells you what matters, what you're willing to lose." He turned his head, tracking my position with a precision that shouldn't have been possible. Close the door, Ethan. The cleaners passed through this town 3 hours ago. They're circling back. They won't check the bar twice. They think they've already cleared it. But if they see light under this door, if they hear voices. He smiled. Close it. I closed it. The sound was final. The click of a lock engaging, or my imagination supplying one. There was no chair, just the floor, wooden, worn smooth by decades of feet. I sat cross-legged, facing the desk. The master ledger lay between us, leather-bound, thick as a brick. I could see pages protruding from the edges, some yellowed with age, some fresh and white, some stained with colors I didn't want to identify. Architect, the librarian said. He opened the master ledger, flipping through pages with fingers that moved too fast for eyes like his. Not a name, a title, passed down, inherited, bought. The first architect designed Phase 1 in 1987. A private hospital in Switzerland, discreet, legal, barely. Their child died there, overdose, covered up, the family grateful. They saw the potential, the need, the market. He stopped at a page near the middle, tapped it. Second architect expanded, 1994. Eastern Europe, facilities in 4 countries. The fall of the Soviet Union created opportunities, wealth without accountability. Families who had spent generations learning to disappear, people now with money and global connections. Another page, third architect, 2003, the franchise model, your stepmother's innovation but not her invention. She bought in, paid for the territory, managed the local architecture, reported upward, took her percentage. He looked at me with those white eyes. She was good, Ethan, efficient, ruthless, the kind of manager who exceeded projections, who expanded the inventory, who turned a regional operation into a national one. The current architect, the librarian closed the master ledger. Unknown, he said. The transition happened 6 months ago. The third architect, Clarissa's predecessor, died. Natural causes, supposedly, heart attack, but the timing, he shrugged. Convenient. The new architect appeared immediately. Gap in operations. No disruption to cash flow, just a new voice on encrypted calls, a new signature on wire transfers, a new philosophy. Previous architects were businessmen, profit-driven, expansion-oriented. The new one, he paused, tilted his head. Different, more ideological. The machine isn't just a business anymore, it's a mission, a crusade. The new architect believes that some people deserve to be erased, not because they're inconvenient, because they're wrong. Flawed, damaged, better removed than repaired, he leaned forward. Your mother was one of the first under the new regime. 2008, the diagnosis was real, the cancer, but the treatment was designed to fail, slowly, expensively, painfully, to make her suffer, to make your father suffer, to turn a family into a laboratory for the architect's theories. I felt something cold in my chest, not rage, something older. Something that had been waiting since I was 8 years old, since the funeral I didn't attend, since the stepmother appeared with her perfect smile and her machine for erasing mothers. Why her? The librarian opened the master ledger again, found a page near the back, held it up, a photograph, my mother, young, maybe 20, standing in front of a building I didn't recognize, not a hospital, not a facility, a university. She was smiling. Not the careful smile from the cottage, the performative smile from the facility. A real smile, free, unburdened. Behind her, partially visible in the frame, stood another woman. Dark hair, sharp features, eyes that even in a faded photograph seemed to cut through the lens. Elena Whitfield, the librarian said, tapping my mother's image. Pre-med, top of her class, full scholarship. He moved his finger to the other woman. And this, his voice changed, became softer, almost reverent. This is the architect, or who the architect was, before. I stared at the photograph, the woman behind my mother, the eyes. I'd seen them before, not in person, not in memory, but in the mirror, in my own face. In the particular shape of my cheekbones, the angle of my jaw, the way I held my head when I was thinking. She's your mother's sister, the librarian said. Your aunt, Evelyn Vance, born 3 years after your mother. Different father, different life, but the same eyes, the same intelligence, the same stubbornness. He set the photograph down. They were close once, college roommates, best friends. Then something happened. 1987, the overdose I mentioned. The first architect's child. It was Evelyn's child too. She was pregnant. She hid it. She gave birth in secret. She gave the baby to the system, to the machine, to the father who would build an empire on its silence. He paused. Your mother found out. She tried to stop it. She tried to save the baby. She failed. The baby disappeared. The father died. Evelyn was changed. She blamed your mother for knowing, for trying, for not trying hard enough, for surviving when her child didn't. I looked at the photograph again, my mother smiling, unaware, my aunt standing behind her, already gone. Evelyn became the architect, the librarian said. Not immediately. She spent years learning, climbing, proving herself to the machine she would eventually inherit, but she never forgot, never forgave. And when she finally took control 6 months ago, she began with your mother. The cancer, the facility, the erasure, not because Elena was inconvenient, because she was personal. He closed the master ledger. Your stepmother, Clarissa, she was Evelyn's tool, her instrument, her way of reaching into your family without exposing herself. She managed the facility. She managed your father. She managed you, all while Evelyn watched from a distance. Guided, approved, waited for the moment when your mother would finally break, when your father would finally collapse, when you would finally disappear. He leaned back. But you didn't disappear, he said. You died, you were reborn, you became the ledger. And now Evelyn, the architect, knows about you, not as a victim, as a threat. The first real threat the machine has faced in 30 years. I sat in silence, the bulbs swayed, the shelves breathed. The thousands of notebooks watched, patient, waiting. What do? I asked. The librarian smiled. You finish it, he said. The ledger, the story, the war. You find Evelyn, you confront her, you make her see what she's become, what the machine has turned her into. You make her understand that the child she lost, the child she blames your mother for, is not coming back, that the machine doesn't resurrect the dead, it just creates more ghosts. He pushed the master ledger toward me. Take it, he said. It's yours now. Every name, every facility, every signature, the complete architecture. Use it, publish it, burn it, whatever you need to do to finish this. I didn't touch it. Why me? I asked. Why not you? You've been collecting this for decades. You know more than I do. You have resources, connections, the network of ledger keepers. Librarian's smile faded. Because I am old, he said. Because I am blind. Because I spent my life watching and recording and never acting. I am the keeper of stories, Ethan, not the hero of them. He touched his white eyes. These are not cataracts, they're scars. From a time when I tried to be what you are, when I tried to fight. I failed. The machine took my sight, my family, my name. It left me alive because a blind man is no threat. A blind man can only watch, only remember. Only wait for someone younger, someone braver, someone who has already died and discovered that death is not the end. He stood slowly, painfully, the movements of a body that had been broken and healed wrong. Your mother is in Seoul, he said. She found Sujin, they're building the network, gathering the families, the signers, the ones who paid for silence and are ready to speak, but they need the master ledger, they need the proof, they need the names. He walked to a shelf, pulled down a small box. Wooden. Carved with the same pattern as my mother's, intertwined initials, E and M. Your mother left this, he said. Before she went to the facility, before she knew what was coming, she gave it to me for safekeeping. Said that someday someone would come, someone who needed to know the truth, someone who could finish what she started. He handed me the box. I opened it. Inside was a key, not brass, not like the facility key. Silver, old, tarnished. And a note in my mother's handwriting, the same handwriting from the photograph, from the cottage, from the message that had led me here. For Evelyn, the room she doesn't know I know about, the room where she keeps what she lost. The only thing that can stop the machine. Find it, Ethan, find the room, find the child, and give Evelyn back what the machine took. I looked up. The librarian was gone. The door was open. The bar beyond was silent, empty, the scarred bartender mopping the same spot with the same rag, not looking up as I emerged. I walked out into the night. The car was where I'd left it. The tank was still full. The trunk still held food, water, cash. I sat in the driver's seat. I looked at the key, silver, old, tarnished, a key to a room I didn't know, a room where the architect kept what she lost, the child. I started the car. I drove, not toward Seoul, not yet. Toward the last address in the master ledger. The address marked architect, the address where my aunt waited, where the machine had its heart, where the only thing that could stop it was the thing it had spent 30 years trying to bury. The facility was different from 247 Westbrook Lane, larger, older, hidden in plain sight, a converted estate on a hill, surrounded by trees, with a view of the city below that suggested not imprisonment but privilege. The kind of place where wealthy families sent their children for treatment, where the architecture was beautiful and the bars were invisible. I parked a mile away, walked through the woods, found a door marked service. The silver key fit, the lock turned silently. I entered. The room was at the top of the house, small, attic, dusty, filled with the debris of a life that had been abandoned, toys, clothes, a crib with faded paint and photographs, hundreds of them, a child, growing, changing. From infant to toddler to young child, the same face in everyone, dark hair, sharp features, eyes that cut through the lens, eyes like mine. I picked up the last photograph. The child was maybe 5, standing in front of a window, smiling, not the careful smile of performance, a real smile, free. The date on the back, 1992, 5 years after the overdose, 5 years after the disappearance, 5 years after Evelyn had given her child to the machine and become its architect. The child had lived, had grown, had been hidden, not erased, preserved. I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. Evelyn stood in the doorway, my aunt, the architect, older than the photograph from my mother's college days, grey at the temples, lines around the eyes that weren't from smiling. She wore a suit that cost more than the cottage, more than the motel, more than everything my mother had owned in 15 years of imprisonment. She looked at me, at my face, at her own eyes staring back at her. Ethan, she said. Not surprised, not angry, resigned, the voice of someone who had been waiting for this moment, who had planned for it, who had built the machine knowing that someday someone would come to destroy it. You found the room, she said. I found everything. She stepped inside, closed the door, sat on the floor among the toys and photographs and the dust of a life that had never been lived. She was beautiful, Evelyn said, not looking at me, looking at the photograph in my hand. Isabel, that was her name. I named her after my grandmother, the only person who ever loved me without wanting something. She reached out, touched the photograph. Her finger traced the child's smile. I gave her to the machine because I thought it would save her, because I was young and scared, and the father, the first architect, he promised. He said she would be safe, hidden, protected, that someday when the world was ready I could claim her. She laughed, broken, bitter, but the machine doesn't give back what it takes. It just keeps taking. I searched for years. Decades. I built the architecture, expanded it, made it stronger, thinking that if I was powerful enough, if I was indispensable enough, they would tell me where she was, they would give her back. She looked at me. They didn't. They lied. They moved her. They told me she died. 1995, pneumonia. A small funeral I wasn't invited to because I was too emotional, because I might draw attention. She stood, walked to the window, looked out at the city below. So I became the architect. I took control. I built the machine into what it is today, not for profit, not for power, for information, for leverage, for the hope that someday somewhere in one of the facilities, in one of the files, I would find her or find what happened to her. She turned, and then you appeared, the ledger boy, the ghost who wouldn't stay buried, my sister's son, the child of the woman who tried to save Isabel, who failed, who survived when my daughter didn't. She walked toward me, slowly, not threatening, not angry, just tired. The tired of someone who had been fighting for 30 years and was only now realizing that the fight had no winner. I thought if I destroyed your mother, she said, I would feel better, if I made her suffer the way I suffered, if I took her son, you, and turned him into furniture, into nothing, into the same kind of ghost that Isabel became. I thought it would balance the ledger. She stopped. Arm's length away, close enough to touch. But it doesn't balance, she whispered. It never balances. The machine just keeps creating more debt, more ghosts, more children who disappear and mothers who search and aunts who become monsters trying to find them. She held out her hand, not for the photograph or the key. Give it to me, she said. The master ledger, the names, the facilities, the complete architecture. Give it to me and I'll stop. I'll dismantle it. I'll free every patient. I'll burn every record. I'll turn myself in. I'll do whatever you want. Just, her voice broke. Just tell me where she is. Tell me what happened to Isabel. Give me that one piece, that one truth, and the machine dies. I looked at her, my aunt, the architect, the woman who had built the system that erased my mother, who had turned my father into a puppet, who had made me furniture and Marcus Golden and thousands of others into ghosts. I held the master ledger in one hand, the photograph of Isabel in the other, and I understood, finally, what the ledger was, not a weapon, not a record of debts. A map toward the truth, toward the room where the lost things were kept, toward the possibility that even the machine could be undone, not by destruction, by return, by giving back what was taken. I held out the photograph. Evelyn took it. Her hands shook. Tears ran down her face, the first tears maybe in 30 years. She's alive, I said. Evelyn froze. She's alive. She's in the master ledger under a different name, a different facility. Phase 4, Colorado. She's 34 now, married, 2 children. She doesn't know about you. The machine gave her a new identity, a new life, erased the old one completely. I opened the master ledger, found the page, held it out. Evelyn stared at it. She didn't touch it, she just stared. She's alive, she repeated. She's alive. The machine ends now, I said. You have the master ledger, you have the names. You have the power to dismantle it, to free them all, to turn yourself in, to become something else. I paused. Or you can keep running it, keep erasing, keep creating ghosts, and I'll keep writing, keep remembering, keep fighting, until one of us is gone. I walked to the door, paused. Your sister is in Seoul, I said. My mother, she doesn't know about this room, about Isabel, about why you did what you did, but she's ready to listen, ready to understand. Ready to help you become something other than the architect. I opened the door. Tick-tock, Evelyn, I said. 11:47 p.m., the time of my death, the time of my rebirth, the time when everything changes. I walked out. I didn't look back, but I heard her sitting in the dust among the toys, holding the photograph of a child who was still alive, crying, not the tears of a monster. The tears of a mother. I drove through the night, toward Seoul, toward my mother, toward Sujin and the network and the families who were ready to speak. The master ledger was gone, given to the woman who had built the machine, trusted to dismantle it, a gamble, a risk, the kind of choice that only someone who had already died could make, because death taught you that some things were worth more than survival, truth, family, the stubborn, beautiful refusal to let the machine win. I reached the airport at dawn. Bought a ticket with the cash from the trunk, boarded the plane, sat by the window, watched the city shrink below, and I opened my notebook. I wrote, Entry 16, the architect has a name. Evelyn, my aunt, my mother's sister, a woman who built a machine to find a child she lost, who became a monster trying to become a mother again, who holds the master ledger now, who has a choice. I paused, the plane climbed, the clouds swallowed the city. I don't know if she'll dismantle it, I don't know if she'll free them. I don't know if I'll ever see her again, or if the next time we meet it will be across a courtroom, a prison, a grave. Another pause, but I know this, the ledger is not closed, the ghosts are not silent, and I am still writing. I closed the notebook. I looked out the window. The sun was rising over the clouds, gold and red and infinite, the kind of light that made you believe for a moment that the world could be different, that the machine could be stopped, that the furniture could stand up, that the ghosts could finally rest. Chapter 11. Seoul was grey. Not the grey of clouds, but the grey of concrete, of winter air too cold to hold colour, of a city that had rebuilt itself too many times to believe in permanence. My mother walked ahead of me through the airport, her steps quick, practiced, the gait of someone who had learned that stopping meant danger, that stillness was a target. She didn't speak until we were in the car. A small sedan, dented, anonymous. Sujin drove. Saw her only in profile, sharp nose, sharper jaw, haircut so short it was almost military. She looked younger than I expected. She handled the car like a weapon. "The Ledger boy," she said, "not a question. Ethan, I know your name." She merged into traffic without signaling, cutting off a truck that honked once and fell silent. "I know your mother's name. I know your aunt's name. I know the names of 473 people currently held in facilities across 12 countries. What I don't know is whether you're useful or just loud." My mother tensed in the passenger seat. Sujin said, "We don't have time for gentle introductions. The cleaners missed you in the States by 6 hours. They know you're here. They'll be waiting at the apartment, the hotel, every obvious place." She glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "So we go somewhere they won't look, somewhere the old architect never used, somewhere the new one doesn't know about yet." "Is the new one?" I asked. Sujin didn't answer. She drove. The building was in a district I didn't recognize. Narrow streets, laundry hanging between windows, an old woman squatting by a doorway, sorting vegetables into plastic bowls. She didn't look up as we passed. Inside, the stairs were steep. The walls smelled of kimchi and mildew. My mother's breathing grew heavier with each flight. I watched her, the woman who had survived 15 years, who had walked out of a concrete fortress, who had crossed an ocean to build a network, and I saw the cost. The tremor in her legs, the way she gripped the railing, the stubbornness that kept her moving when her body begged to stop. The apartment was on the 4th floor, 2 rooms, a kitchen that was also a living room, a bedroom with 3 mattresses on the floor, a laptop open on a crate, screen glowing with data I couldn't read. Sujin locked the door, 3 locks, a chain, a bar. She turned to me. "Show me." "Show you what?" "The ledger, your ledger, the one you carried while they hunted you, the one you wrote in while your mother was in a cage." She stepped closer, close enough that I smelled garlic and gun oil. "I need to know how you think, how you remember, how you turned 10 years of servitude into a weapon." I pulled out my notebook, worn, water-stained, the cover soft from handling. Sujin took it. She didn't open it immediately. She weighed it in her hand, felt the thickness, the density of memory compressed between cardboard covers. Then she opened it. She read the first entry. The second. She flipped forward faster, her eyes moving with a speed that suggested she'd done this before. "Read the private thoughts of strangers, judged their worth, decided their fate." She stopped at entry 10. "Marcus is going to confess." She looked up at me. "You predicted this." I knew him. I knew his breaking point. "Your aunt, Evelyn, you predicted her too." I knew she had lost something. I didn't know what. Sujin closed the notebook. She handed it back. "Not a strategist," she said. "You're a witness. You see patterns because you had to survive them. You remember details because details were the only power you had." She walked to the laptop. "That's useful, but it's not enough, not against what's coming." She turned the screen toward me. A map, red dots scattered across continents. Some clustered, some isolated. "Facilities," she said. "The ones we know about, the ones the master ledger confirmed." She pointed to a cluster in Eastern Europe, another in South America. "These went dark 6 hours ago, simultaneously. Staff evacuated, patients transferred, records destroyed. The old architect, your aunt, she kept them running, stable, predictable." She pointed to new dots, blue, appearing in different locations. "These opened 12 hours ago, same patients, same staff. Different addresses, different ownership. The machine didn't stop Ethan, it just migrated like a virus finding new hosts." My mother sat on the nearest mattress. Her face was grey, matching the city outside. "Evelyn, arrested," Sujin said. 12 hours ago, turned herself in, gave the authorities the master ledger. Names, locations, everything." She paused. "It should have worked. It should have destroyed the machine, but someone was ready. Someone had prepared for this." "The new architect moved faster than the old one ever could." She looked at me. "New architect has your notebook, Ethan. The one from your room, the one with your entries, your patterns, your predictions. They're using it to anticipate us, to find the families before we do, to silence them permanently." I felt the cold from outside seep through the walls, through my clothes, into my chest. "My notebook. Your stepmother had it photographed, before the trial, before your father testified. She gave copies to the machine, to the network, to anyone who might need leverage against you." Sujin's voice was flat, clinical. "They've been studying you, learning how you think, how you plan, how you turn patients into power." She walked to the window, looked out at the grey city, the hanging laundry, the old woman still sorting vegetables. "They know about the cottage, the keeper, the librarian. They're moving against all of them tonight." She turned. "We have 12 names left. 12 families who paid for erasure and are ready to speak. 12 witnesses who can connect the old machine to the new one, who can prove continuity, who can show that this isn't just one criminal operation but a system that regenerates, adapts, survives." She looked at my mother, then at me. "We need to reach them before the cleaners do, all 12, in the next 48 hours. "Impossible," my mother said. "Necessary," Sujin replied. I opened my notebook, found a blank page. Entry 17, the machine regenerates, the architect is replaced. My notebook is being used against me. 12 families remain, 48 hours. I looked up. Where's the first one? Sujin smiled, not warm, not friendly, the smile of someone who had finally seen what she needed to see. Busan, she said. A woman named Park Hee-chul. Her daughter disappeared in 2019, paid for treatment for depression. The daughter never came back. Mrs. Park has been searching ever since. She has records, emails, proof of payment. Sujin grabbed a coat from the hook by the door. She's also being watched. 2 cleaners arrived in Busan this morning. They're waiting for her to move, to contact someone, to become visible. Then we make her invisible, I said. Sujin paused. How I thought of my first life. Of the kitchens, the bedrooms, the particular hell of being seen through without being seen. Of the skills that servitude had taught me. Invisibility, patience. The ability to move through spaces without disturbing them. We don't contact her, I said. We become her servants, her delivery drivers, her neighbors. We move around her without touching her. We create a shell of normalcy so thick that the cleaners can't see through it. And when they're distracted, when they're looking for contact, for connection, for the obvious move, we move her. Not her, her records, her proof, her voice. I wrote again. The machine sees threats. It doesn't see furniture. It doesn't see servants. It doesn't see the people who move through rooms without leaving traces. I closed the notebook. Go, I said. Alone, as a delivery boy, a student, someone too young, too poor, too unimportant to be noticed. I'll find Mrs. Park. I'll take her records, I'll leave her safe, and the cleaners will never know I was there. My mother stood. No, Mom, you're 16, you're my son, I just found you. Her voice cracked. I won't lose you to the machine, not again, not to save strangers, not for a ledger that never ends. I looked at her, the woman who had survived 15 years by performing cooperation, by becoming invisible in a different way, by letting the machine believe it had broken her when it had only taught her to wait. Have to, I said. I'm the only one who can move like they do, like furniture, like ghosts. I touched her hand. And because you taught me in the facility, in the white room, you survived by being patient, by waiting, by keeping the light burning in the darkness. But you couldn't escape alone. You needed someone outside, someone with a key, someone who remembered. I squeezed her hand. Let me be the key, Mom. Let me remember for them, for the 12. For everyone the machine is still swallowing. She looked at me, longer than Sujin had studied my notebook, longer than the courtroom had held its breath, longer than the space between one tick of the clock and the next. Then she nodded, once, small, final. Sujin drove me to the bus station. She didn't speak until I was at the door. Cleaners in Busan, she said. They're not like the ones in the States. They're local, efficient, they don't make mistakes, they don't leave witnesses. She handed me a phone, prepaid, untraceable. Call when you have the records, not before. If you're caught, I won't be caught. If you're caught, she repeated, don't call, we'll know. We'll move to the next name, we won't come for you. I looked at her. Would you come for me? She held my gaze then. No, she drove away. I boarded the bus. Busan was warmer than Seoul. Coastal air, salt and fish, and the particular energy of a port city that never fully sleeps. I walked from the station with a backpack that Sujin had given me, old clothes, a student ID from a school that didn't exist, a wallet with enough cash to seem real but not enough to attract attention. Mrs. Park lived in an apartment complex near the harbor. 17 floors, identical balconies, identical doors. The kind of place where people disappeared into their own lives, where neighbors didn't know neighbors, where a boy with a backpack could be anyone and no one. I found her floor. Walked the hallway, stopped at her door, and saw the cleaner. He was sitting on a bench by the elevator, reading a newspaper. Middle-aged, bland, the kind of face you forgot while you were still looking at it. But his shoes were wrong, too new, too expensive. And his newspaper was 2 days old. I kept walking, past Mrs. Park's door, past the cleaner, to the stairwell. I sat on the steps, opened my backpack, found the student who'd found a pen, wrote on the back of their ID, Mrs. Park, I knew your daughter. I know where she is. Meet me at the harbor. Pier 7, 6 p.m. Come alone, tell no one, burn this. I tore the ID in half, kept the half with the message. Wrapped it around a stone I'd found on the street outside the bus station. I walked back into the hallway. The cleaner was still reading his newspaper. I walked past him again, dropped the stone. It hit the floor with a sound between a click and a thud. The cleaner didn't look up. I kept walking. Around the corner, waited 30 seconds. A door opened. Mrs. Park's door. I heard her step into the hallway, heard her pick up the stone, heard her unfold the paper, heard her gasp, then silence, then her door closed. I walked to the elevator, pressed the button, waited, the doors opened. I stepped inside. The cleaner was still on his bench, still reading his 2-day-old newspaper, still waiting for a contact that would never come. I rode the elevator down. I walked to the harbor. I waited. Mrs. Park arrived at 5:47 p.m., 13 minutes early. The habit of a mother who had spent years waiting for news that never came. She was small, grey-haired. Her coat was patched at the elbows. She held the torn student ID in her hand, the message visible, her thumb rubbing the words as if she could wear them into truth. She saw me, paused, looked at my face, 16, smooth, unmarked by the years that had carved her. You knew my daughter. I know where she is. I didn't say knew. Didn't use the past tense. Didn't offer comfort or hope or any of the lies that the machine used to keep families paying, waiting, silent. Mrs. Park stepped closer. Where? Phase 4, Colorado. She's alive, married, children. She doesn't know about you. The machine gave her a new life, erased the old one completely. Park's hand went to her mouth. She didn't cry. She had learned not to cry. The same lesson as my mother. The same lesson as everyone the machine touched. Proof, she whispered. I held out my hand. She gave me the records, emails, payment receipts. A contract signed in Korean and English, the English portion full of words like voluntary and confidential and permanent transfer of guardianship. I photographed them with the phone Sujin had given me, uploaded them to the encrypted server, deleted the local copies, handed the originals back to Mrs. Park. Keep these, I said. Hide them. When the time comes, when we have enough voices, enough proof, enough witnesses, you'll be called, you'll speak, and the machine will finally hear you. Park took the records. She didn't move. Why? She asked. Why help me? Why now? I thought of my mother in the white room, of Evelyn in the attic with the toys, of Marcus folding his blazer and choosing truth over gold. Because I said, the ledger isn't just mine, it's yours, it's everyone's, and it's time to balance it. I walked away. I didn't look back, but I heard her, standing on Pier 7 holding the records, whispering her daughter's name into the harbour wind. I called Sujin from the bus back to Seoul. First name secured, I said. Second name, she replied. Incheon, a man named Kim Yi-sun. His brother disappeared in 2015. The cleaners are already there, 3 of them, watching his apartment, his workplace, his mother's nursing home. Be there by morning. Ethan. Yes, the new architect. She paused. Static on the line. They sent a message through one of the families, a recording. What kind of recording? Your voice, from the trial, from the motel, from the car ride with your mother. Another pause. They're learning you, not just your patterns, your voice, your face. They're building something, a replica, a replacement. I felt the cold from Busan Harbour follow me onto the bus. A replacement for what? For you, Ethan. They're building a replacement for you. So that when the real Ethan Whitfield speaks, when the ledger boy testifies, when the ghost who survived stands in front of the world, no one will believe him. Because there will be another Ethan, saying different things, supporting the machine, destroying his own story from the inside. Bus moved through the dark. I looked out the window at my reflection, at the face the machine was trying to copy. Then build it, I said. Ethan, let them build it. Let them spend their resources, their time. Their belief that a copy can replace the original. I opened my notebook, wrote in the dark, by memory, by feel. Because the one thing the machine will never understand, the one thing Evelyn never understood, that Clarissa never understood, that no architect has ever understood, is that the ledger isn't in the notebook. It's not in the voice, not in the face, not in the patterns they study and copy and try to replace. I looked at the words I'd written. Ledger is in the dying, in the rebirth. In the particular, unrepeatable moment when a boy with a knife in his chest decides to remember instead of forget. Ledger, I said to Sujin, is in the living, the real living, the kind that can't be copied, can't be faked, can't be erased. I closed the notebook. Then build their replacement. I'll be too busy building something else. What? I thought of Mrs. Park on Pier 7, of my mother in the white room, of Evelyn in the attic with the photograph of a child who was still alive. End, I said, then I hung up, and I wrote in the dark, on a bus moving through a country I didn't know, toward a city that held my mother and my future and the 12 names that would either save us or bury us. Entry 18, the machine copies, it replaces, it regenerates, but it cannot create. It can only imitate what already exists. The new architect builds a replacement for me. Let them. I am building something they cannot copy. Something that requires not patience, not memory, not strategy, but choice. The choice to serve instead of rule, to witness instead of erase, to love instead of consume. The choice my mother made, the choice Evelyn forgot, the choice that no machine, no matter how perfect, can ever understand. I closed the notebook. I leaned against the window. I slept. For the first time since Seoul, without dreams, without clocks, without the weight of the ledger pressing against my chest, just sleep, just the bus moving through the dark, just the impossible, beautiful fact of being alive and choosing. Chapter 12. Kim Yi-sun's apartment smelled of instant noodles and stale air. The blinds were drawn. The only light came from a laptop screen, its glow casting blue shadows across his face. He sat on a mattress on the floor, knees drawn up, the posture of a man who had learned that beds were for people who could sleep. I sat across from him. Cross-legged, the servant's position, the furniture's position, the position that said I am not a threat, I am not important, I am just here. They came at 2 a.m., he said. His voice was flat, the flat of a man who had used up every other emotion and found them insufficient. 2 men, white coats. They said they were transferring her to a specialized facility. Better care, new treatments. They had papers, signatures, everything legal, everything proper. He laughed. The sound scraped against the walls. She didn't recognize them. She didn't recognize me. She just went quietly like a child, like she was already gone. I opened my notebook, wrote, Entry 19, Kim Yi-sun. Mother taken 2 a.m., cleaners in white coats, legal papers, proper signatures. The machine doesn't just erase, it convinces. It makes the erasure look like care, like improvement, like love. I looked up. Your brother, I said. What happened to him? Kim Yi-sun's hands tightened on his knees. 2015, depression, the kind that doesn't respond to medication. Our family, we had money then, not much. Enough to be targeted. A man approached my father at a golf course, spoke about a private retreat. Discreet care, respected families. My father signed, my brother went. We were told not to visit, not to call, to let the treatment work. He reached for a bottle on the floor, water, warm, he didn't drink. 6 months later we received a letter, complications, unexpected. My brother had passed, cremated, ashes scattered at sea, no body, no funeral, no closure, just gone. He set the bottle down. I found the facility 3 years later. Closed, converted to apartments, no records, no staff, no proof that it ever existed. I hired lawyers, private investigators, I spent everything, found nothing. The machine had digested my brother and moved on, left no trace. He looked at me, and now my mother, the same pattern, the same white coats, the same better care. She's 73, she doesn't remember my name, but she remembers my brother, she asks about him. Every visit, where is he, when is he coming? And I lie, I tell her he's traveling, working abroad, happy, his voice cracked. Now I'll have to lie about her too, where she is, when she's coming, whether she's happy. I closed my notebook, set it on the floor between us. Cleaners in the car, I said. They're waiting for you to move, to contact someone, to become visible. Then they'll take you too, or worse, they'll let you live, let you speak. Let you become the crazy son who lost his brother and his mother to imaginary conspiracies. The machine doesn't always erase, sometimes it discredits, sometimes it lets the witness destroy themselves. Kim Yi-sun nodded. I know, I've seen it. Other families, other searchers, they speak out, they protest, they demand answers, and the machine lets them, gives them attention, gives them rope, lets them hang themselves with their own desperation. He looked at the laptop. So what do I do? What does your ledger say about a man who has nothing? I thought of my first life, of the kitchen floor, the bucket, the dirty water, the knife of dying with nothing, no mother, no father, no name that anyone remembered, just a clock on the wall and a ledger that no one would ever read. You have something, I said. What? Her fear. Kim Yi-sun blinked. Your mother, she knows fear, she knows the white room, she knows the machine, even with dementia, even without your name, she knows. I leaned forward. The machine thinks she's nothing, a senile old woman, inventory, but she's a witness. She saw the cleaners, she saw the white coats, she felt the restraints. She knows in whatever part of her mind still works that something is wrong. I picked up my notebook, opened it to a fresh page, and there's something else, something the machine doesn't know. Your brother, he's not dead. Kim Yi-sun went still. What? He's in phase 4, Colorado, same as Mrs. Park's daughter, same as dozens of others. The machine doesn't kill, it stores, it renames, it gives new lives to old problems. Your brother is alive, married, 2 children, he doesn't know about you, but he's alive. Kim Yi-sun's face changed, the flatness cracked, something emerged, not hope, not yet, but the possibility of hope, the memory of what hope felt like. Do you know, the master ledger, the complete architecture, every name, every facility, every new identity? I paused. I gave it to the authorities. To the old architect, but I kept copies. I kept memories. I kept the names of everyone the machine tried to erase. I wrote in the notebook, Kim Yi-sun's brother. Alive, phase 4, Colorado, married, 2 children, name changed, identity erased, but living. I tore out the page, handed it to Kim Yi-sun. He took it with hands that shook. This is real, it's real. He stared at the words, his brother's location. His brother's new life, the proof that the machine had lied, that the ashes were fake. That the scattering at sea was theater. What do? He whispered. You survive, I said. You stay invisible, you don't contact the authorities, you don't speak to journalists, you don't protest or demand or hang yourself with rope the machine gives you. I stood, walked to the window, peeked through the blinds. The cleaners were still in the car, still watching, still patient. You wait, I said. You work, you save, you build a life that looks normal, boring, unremarkable. And when the time comes, when we have enough voices, enough witnesses, enough proof, you speak. Not alone, not desperate, but as part of a chorus, a ledger, a story too big to erase. I turned back to him. And in the meantime you write everything, your brother's disappearance, your mother's abduction, the white coats, the papers, the signatures. You write it and you hide it and you wait. Kim Yi-sun looked at the page in his hand, then at me. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. Oh me? I thought of my mother in the white room, of Evelyn in the attic, of Marcus folding his blazer, of the keeper of ashes with her cat and her garden and her stubborn refusal to let the fire die. Because, I said, the ledger isn't mine, it never was, I'm just the one who carries it, the one who remembers, the one who refuses to let the machine win by making us forget each other. I walked to the door. Burn that page after you memorize it, don't keep records, don't keep proof. Just keep living, keep waiting, keep the light burning. I opened the door. Kim Yi-sun, he looked up. Your mother, she may not know your name, but she knows you, somewhere. In whatever part of her the machine couldn't reach, she knows her son is searching. That knowledge is the one thing they can't erase, hold on to it. I walked out, closed the door, became a delivery boy, a student, a ghost, walked past the cleaner's car, didn't look, didn't speed up, didn't exist. I found a coffee shop 3 blocks away, ordered black coffee, sat by the window, opened my notebook, wrote, Entry 20, Kim Yi-sun. Brother alive, mother taken, nothing left but fear and the memory of love. He will survive, he will wait, he will speak when the chorus is ready. I sipped the coffee, it was bitter, cold, perfect. The phone buzzed. Sujin, 3rd name, she said. Daegu, a woman named Lee Minjai. Her husband disappeared in 2018. She has been searching ever since. She also has a gun and a plan to use it. Against who? The facility, the staff, the machine. She doesn't care about witnesses or choruses or ledgers. She wants blood. I closed the notebook. Here is she now, outside the facility where her husband was held. It's closed, converted, but she's there, screaming, threatening, drawing attention. The cleaners are moving in. If we don't reach her in the next hour, she'll be another name on the list of disappeared. Another ghost no one remembers. I stood, left money for the coffee, walked out. I'm on my way. Ethan. Sujin's voice was different, urgent. There's something else. The replacement, the fake you, it's active. It contacted one of the families. Spoke to them, used your voice, your patterns. It told them to stop searching, to accept the losses, to move on. It told them the ledger was a lie, that you were a lie, that the whole story was the delusion of a disturbed boy. I stopped on the sidewalk. People flowed around me, invisible, furniture, ghost. Which family? The Parks. Mrs. Park, the one you met in Busan. I felt something cold, not fear, recognition. The machine was learning, not just copying, countering. Using my own voice to destroy the trust I had built. She believed it. She's uncertain, confused. The replacement was convincing. It knew details, things from your notebook, your mother's name, the cottage, the keeper of ashes. Sujin paused. It's not just a copy, Ethan, it's an improvement. It takes what you are and removes the weakness. The doubt, the humanity, it gives them a perfect version, a machine version, and it's working. I looked at the sky, grey, endless. The color of concrete and winter and the particular exhaustion of a war that had no clear end. Then I need to speak to her, I said. Not the replacement, me, the real one, the one who died and was reborn and carries the scars. How? I thought of Mrs. Park on Pier 7, of her hand rubbing the message on the torn student ID, of her whispering her daughter's name into the harbor wind. She knows me, I said. Not my voice, not my face. She knows what I did, what I chose. The replacement can copy my words. It can't copy my choices. I started walking toward the bus station, toward Daegu, toward Lee Minjai and her gun and her scream for blood. Tell Mrs. Park to ask the replacement a question, I said. What question? Ask it about the stone. Stone, the one I wrapped the message in, the one I dropped in her hallway. Ask the replacement about the stone. I hung up, I walked. And I wrote as I walked in the notebook, in the grey light, in the city that didn't know my name. Entry 21, the machine copies, it improves, it replaces. But it cannot choose, it cannot drop a stone in a hallway. It cannot wrap a message in something heavy enough to be heard. It cannot understand that the medium is the message, that the weight matters, that the choice to be heavy, to be noticed, to be real, that choice is the one thing it can never replicate. I closed the notebook, I walked faster. Toward Daegu, toward Lee Minjai, toward the woman with the gun and the scream and the nothing left to lose. Chapter 13. Lee Minjai's apartment was smaller than Kim Yi-sun's. One room, a kitchenette that was also a bathroom sink, a window that faced a brick wall 3 meters away. She had covered the wall with photographs, her husband, their wedding, a trip to Jeju Island where they had stood on black volcanic rock and pretended to be brave against the wind. She sat on the single chair. I sat on the floor. The stone was in her pocket now. She kept touching it through the fabric, checking it was real, that this wasn't another dream that would dissolve when she woke. Replacement called me, she said. Last night, it sounded like you, it knew things, my husband's name, the facility, the date he disappeared. She looked at me, but it offered me something you didn't. Closure. It said my husband was dead, that it had proof, ashes, a death certificate. It said I could stop searching. Stop hurting, move on. She pulled the stone from her pocket, held it in both hands. I almost believed it, she whispered. Because I wanted to, because dead is better than disappeared. Dead has an ending, disappeared just, continues, forever. I opened my notebook, wrote, Entry 22, Lee Minjai. The replacement offers closure. Dead is better than disappeared. The machine understands grief better than we think. It knows that hope is torture, that certainty, even terrible certainty, is a gift. I looked up, replacement lied. I said, your husband is alive. I don't have proof I can show you. No photographs, no documents, just the master ledger, just my memory, just this. I held up the notebook. She looked at it. What's in there? Everything. Everyone. Every name the machine tried to erase, including yours, including his. She set the stone on the table between us. Read me, she said. I opened to the first entry. I read. The words came out differently than I expected. Not the careful, calculated entries of a strategist. Not the cold records of a witness. The voice of a boy who had died and been reborn and learned that survival meant more than endurance. I read about my mother, the cancer that wasn't cancer, the funeral I didn't attend, the stepmother who appeared with her perfect smile and her machine for erasing mothers. I read about Marcus, the golden boy, the purchased grades, the knife at 11:47 p.m. I read about Evelyn, the aunt I never knew. She lost. The machine she built trying to find her. I read about Julian, the tutor with the shaking hand, the debt, the betrayal, the coffee shop at 8 p.m. I read about Mrs. Patterson, the teacher who saw me, who told me I was smart, who was destroyed for telling the truth. I read about the keeper of ashes, the woman with no name, the sister my mother saved. I read about the librarian, the blind man with the white eyes, the master ledger, the room that was larger than the building that held it. I read about my father, the puppet, the drunk, the man who gave my mother a key and couldn't follow. I read until my voice cracked, until Lee Minjai's face was wet. until the brick wall outside the window darkened with evening and the single bulb flickered with the building's old wiring. I read until there was nothing left to read, then I closed the notebook. Li Minjai picked up the stone, she held it to her chest. Wait, she said, I'll join your chorus. She looked at me. But I want to sing first. When the time comes, I want to be loud. I want them to hear me. I want the machine to know that Li Minjai is not disappeared, that she is here. That she remembers. I nodded. You will sing, I said. We all will, together, until they can't ignore us, until they can't erase us, until the ledger is so heavy, so full, so real that it crushes the machine under its weight. She smiled, small, tired, the smile of someone who had finally found a reason to keep breathing. Hide the gun, she said. I'll find a job, I'll become boring, invisible, normal. She paused. But I'll keep the stone, I'll keep your notebook, I'll keep the names. She looked at the photographs on the wall, her husband, their wedding, the black volcanic rock, and when the chorus sings, I'll sing loudest, for him, for me, for everyone the machine tried to turn into nothing. I stood, walked to the door. Lee, she looked up. Replacement, the fake me, it will come back, it will try again, it will offer you certainty, closure, peace. I paused. When it does, remember the stone, remember the weight, remember that the real me never offers peace, only truth. Only the hard, heavy, unerasable fact of being seen. I walked out, the phone buzzed as I reached the street. Sujin, fourth name, she said. Gwangju, a man named Choi Donghyuk. His daughter disappeared in 2020, he's different from the others. He's not searching, he's not screaming, he's building. Building what? A case. Legal, methodical. He's a lawyer, or was before the machine destroyed his practice. He's been collecting evidence for 3 years. Documents, testimonies. Financial records, he has enough to indict half the board of directors. Then why hasn't he? Because he knows it's not enough. The machine has lawyers too, better ones who understand that evidence can be buried, witnesses discredited, cases delayed until the plaintiffs die or disappear. Sujin paused. He wants to meet you, specifically. He heard about the ledger, he thinks you have the piece he's missing. What piece? The architect, the new one, he thinks he knows who it is. But he needs confirmation. He needs someone who has seen the machine from the inside, who understands how it thinks. I looked at the grey sky, the endless winter, the city that didn't know my name. Tell him I'll come, I said, but not alone. Tell him I'm bringing the chorus. I didn't go to Gwangju immediately. I went back to Seoul, to the apartment with 3 locks and the scarred bartender and the librarian's room that shouldn't exist. My mother was there. She sat on her mattress, the laptop open, her fingers moving across the keyboard with a speed that surprised me. She had learned technology in the facility. The orderlies had used tablets to track medications, to record compliance, to monitor the patients who didn't know they were being watched. She had watched them. Learned, waited. Ethan, she said. She didn't stand. Her legs were still weak, still learning freedom. I sat beside her, showed her the notebook, the new entries, Kim Yi-sun, Li Minjai. Families who were waiting, building, keeping the light burning. She read, her fingers stopped moving. Not just collecting names, she said. No, you're building something else. She looked at me, the same eyes from the photograph, the same eyes from the cottage, the same eyes that had survived 15 years of white rooms and chemical compliance and the particular madness of being erased while still breathing. What? I took the notebook back, opened it to a fresh page, wrote, the chorus is not a list, it is a voice. Not my voice, not any single voice, all of them together, saying the same thing. We are here, we remember, we refuse. I showed her, she read, then she reached for the laptop, typed something, turned the screen toward me, a website, simple, unadorned, just text on a white background. Ledger project, for everyone the machine tried to erase, for everyone who remembers, for everyone who refuses. Below it a list, names, growing, Kim Yi-sun, Li Minjai, Mrs. Park. Others I didn't recognize, dozens, hundreds. I started it, my mother said, after you left for Busan. Sujin helped, the librarian provided the server, encrypted, untraceable, for now. She scrolled down, Mori names, Mori stories, Mori voices. Families are finding us, she said. Not all of them, not even most, but enough. They hear about the ledger, about the boy who died and was reborn, about the mother who escaped. They come, they read, they add their names, their stories. Their refusal, she looked at me. It's not enough to destroy the machine, she said. You know that the machine regenerates, replaces, adapts, even with the master ledger, even with Evelyn's testimony, even with all the evidence in the world, the machine will survive, in some form, in some place, with some new architect. She closed the laptop. But this, she touched the screen, this is different. This is not evidence, not proof, not ammunition for a courtroom. This is memory, collective. Shared, impossible to erase completely because it exists in too many places, too many minds, too many hearts. She took my hand. Machine can kill witnesses, it can bribe judges, it can replace architects and relocate facilities and change its name 1,000 times, but it cannot erase a story that is still being told. It cannot disappear a voice that is still singing. It cannot destroy a chorus that keeps adding members. I looked at the closed laptop, at the notebook in my other hand. At my mother, thin, scarred, exhausted, alive. Then we sing, I said, then we sing. We sang, not literally, not yet, but in the weeks that followed, the chorus grew. I traveled. Busan to Daegu to Gwangju, to cities I had never heard of. I met the families. I heard their stories. I added their names to the notebook and their voices to the website and their stones to a growing pile that Sujin kept in a safe house outside Seoul, Choi Dong-hyuk in Gwangju, the lawyer with the methodical mind. He had been right, he knew the new architect's identity, had suspected for years. But he needed my confirmation, my inside knowledge, my understanding of how the machine thought. The new architect was not a stranger, not a replacement recruited from outside. The new architect was someone the machine had made, someone who had grown up inside it, someone who had learned its lessons too well. Marcus, Choi said. I didn't react, not outwardly, but inside something shifted. Something that had been building since the courtroom, since the confession that never happened. Since the moment in my doorway at 11:47 p.m. when Marcus had lowered his hand and walked away. Marcus Whitfield, Choi repeated. The golden boy, the perfect son, the one who was raised inside the machine, who learned its operations from childhood, who was being groomed to take over long before your aunt fell. He slid a folder across his desk, photographs, Marcus at facilities, Marcus with staff. Marcus signing documents, not the form he had signed at 12, but newer ones. Recent ones, documents that authorized transfers, approved treatments, managed inventory. He's been active for months, Choi said. Since before the trial, since before your mother's escape. Clarissa was training him, preparing him, using him as her proxy, her successor, her insurance policy. I opened the folder, looked at the photographs, Marcus in a suit, Marcus in a white coat. Marcus shaking hands with men in suits and women in scrubs, all of them smiling, all of them complicit, all of them part of the architecture. The last photograph was different. Marcus alone, standing in front of a window, looking out. His face was not the face of the golden boy. Not the face of the cruel drunk who had kicked dirty water in my face and raised a knife at 11:47 p.m. His face was empty. The emptiness of someone who had finally become what he was raised to be. A machine. I found Marcus in Seoul, not at a facility, not at a meeting, at a church, small, old, the kind that survived by being unimportant, by being poor, by being invisible in a city that valued wealth and power and the ability to erase inconvenient truths. He sat in the last pew, head bowed, not praying, just sitting. I walked down the aisle, sat beside him. He didn't look up. You found me, he said. Choi found you. I just came. To stop me, to understand. He laughed. Same broken sound from my doorway, from the courtroom, from the moment he had folded his blazer and chosen truth over gold. I couldn't do it, he said. The confession, the truth, Mother Clarissa, she had the photograph, the security footage. She was going to destroy Mrs. Patterson, destroy you, destroy everything, so I made a deal. He finally looked at me. His eyes were different, not empty, full, too full, everything the machine had poured into him. I became the replacement, he said. Not for you, for Clarissa, for Evelyn, for the architect. I agreed to take over, to manage the facilities, to sign the documents, to keep the machine running. In exchange, she would leave you alone, leave your mother alone, let Mrs. Patterson keep her job, let the trial collapse. He looked back at the altar, a simple cross, wood, unadorned. I thought I could control it, he whispered. Thought I could run it differently, better, less cruel, more human. I made changes, small ones. Better food for patients, more contact with families. Less restraints, I thought I was saving them. He laughed again. But the machine doesn't work that way. You can't make it kind, you can't make it gentle, you can only make it efficient. And efficiency requires erasure, requires silence, requires the complete and total disappearance of anyone who threatens the system. He turned to me. I became what I hated, Ethan. I became mother. I became the machine. I became the thing that killed you. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a gun, small, silver, the same color as the key my mother had left me. I can't stop it, he said. I tried, I really tried, but the machine is too big, too old, too hungry. It swallows everyone who tries to change it, makes them part of itself, makes them complicit. He held out the gun handle first to me. So you stop it, he said. The only way it can be stopped. You destroy the architect, you destroy me. And you let the machine eat itself trying to replace me. I looked at the gun. I didn't take it. Marcus. Do it, Ethan. You have the right. I killed you. I kicked you. I erased you. I made you furniture. I made you a ghost. His voice broke. And now I'm making you do it again, making you become what I became. The killer, the eraser, the machine. I stood, walked to the altar, picked up the simple wooden cross, held it in my hands. It was light, hollow. The wood was old, smooth, worn by generations of hands that had gripped it in desperation, in hope, in the particular madness of believing that something larger than themselves could save them. I walked back to Marcus. I set the cross on the pew between us. I sat down. I died once, I said. At 11:47 p.m., with a knife in my chest and a clock on the wall, I died hatting you, wanting you to suffer, wanting to erase you the way you erased me. I looked at him. But I was reborn with something else. Not just rage, not just revenge, a ledger, a list of debts. And do you know what I discovered, Marcus? Do you know what I learned by writing down every cruelty, every lie, every moment of suffering? He shook his head. That the debts don't balance, they never balance. You can't erase suffering with more suffering. You can't cancel cruelty with more cruelty. The ledger doesn't close that way, it just keeps growing, heavier, endless. Until it crushes everyone who tries to carry it. I touched the cross, so I stopped trying to balance it. I stopped trying to make you pay. I started trying to make you see, to understand, to choose something else. I looked at the gun in his hand. It down, Marcus, not because I forgive you, not because the debt is paid, but because the only way to stop the machine is to stop being part of it, to stop feeding it, to stop becoming what it wants us to become. He stared at the gun. Longer than I had stared at the knife in his hand, all those years ago in another life at another time. Then he set it on the pew, beside the cross. He put his head in his hands, and he wept not the tears of a golden boy, not the tears of a machine, the tears of a man who had finally seen what he had become, and chosen something else. I left him in the church, with the cross, with the gun, with the choice he would have to make alone. I walked out into the grey afternoon. I opened my notebook. I wrote entry 23, Marcus, the replacement, the new architect. He chose the machine to protect us. He became what he hated to save what he loved. And now he is choosing again, not gold, not truth, just stopping, just being human. I closed the notebook. I looked at the sky. The grey was breaking, not dramatically, just cracks, thin lines of light where the clouds were too thin to hold the dark. I walked toward the bus station, toward the next name, toward the chorus that was still singing, and I whispered to the air, to the light, to the ghost of a boy who had died at 11:47 p.m. and been reborn with nothing but a notebook and a mother's hope. Tick-tock. The clock still ticks, but I'm still here, still writing, still choosing, still singing. Chapter 14. Julian Vance sat in a coffee shop in Incheon, 3 blocks from the one where I had met him months ago. Different city. Same shaking left hand, same cheap shoes, same expensive glasses now held together with tape at the hinge. He didn't stand when I entered. Just watched me with eyes that had learned to measure every room for exits, every face for threat, every moment for the trap that experience told him was coming. I sat across from him. No folder this time. Secrets to trade, just the notebook, just the ledger, just the weight of everything we had both become. You came, he said, you asked. He laughed, small, bitter, the laugh of a man who had expected disappointment and was still surprised when it didn't arrive. I didn't think you would, after what I did, the statement, the betrayal, signing my name to lies so Clarissa could walk free. He looked at his hands. The tremor was worse now, visible even when he pressed his palms flat against the table. I thought you'd let Dimitri finish me, or let the machine swallow me, or just forget I existed. I opened the notebook, found the page where I had first written his name, Julian Vance, shaking left hand. August 14, 2016. I tore it out, handed it to him. He stared at it. What is this? Your entry, the first one. The one where you were just a tutor with a gambling debt, before the betrayal, before the statement. Before the machine made you choose between survival and truth. He took the page. His hands shook so badly the paper rattled. You kept this. I keep everything. Everyone, every name. I paused. But I don't keep debts forever. Some of them get paid, some of them get forgiven, some of them just stop mattering. He read the page. His lips moved silently, forming words he had forgotten he ever spoke. Possible pressure from father, gambling, drugs, will investigate. He looked up. You investigated me. I investigated everyone. The machine, its parts, its cogs, the people who kept it turning without knowing what they were building. I leaned forward. You were a cog, Julian, not a villain, not a victim, just a man with a shaking hand and a debt who thought he had no other choices. I closed the notebook. Until you did. He folded the page carefully, slipped it into his pocket. The tremor didn't stop, but it changed, became something else, not fear. Recognition, I have evidence, he said. Against Marcus. Signed orders, financial approvals, emails where he authorized new facilities, approved transfers, signed off on. He stopped, swallowed, on disposals, the permanent kind, the ones that don't leave records, don't leave witnesses, don't leave anything. He pulled out a USB drive, set it on the table between us, small, silver, innocuous. This is everything, the complete chain, Marcus as the new architect. His signature on every document, his approval for every action, Julian's voice cracked. His handwriting on the order that disposed of Mrs. Park's daughter, not stored, not renamed, erased completely, permanently because she tried to escape, because she contacted her mother, because she became inconvenient. I looked at the USB, didn't touch it. Why now? I asked. Julian's hand closed around the drive, not pulling it back, holding it like a talisman, like a weapon. Because I saw the website, he said. The Ledger Project, your mother's work, the chorus. He looked at me. I saw my name, Julian Vance, the tutor with the shaking hand, listed among the witnesses, among the survivors, among the people who refused. He laughed, the same broken sound. I didn't refuse, Ethan. I complied, I signed, I lied. I betrayed you and Mrs. Patterson and everyone who ever trusted me. I don't deserve to be on that list. I don't deserve to be part of your chorus. He pushed the USB toward me. But I can earn it, he said. I can testify publicly in court against Marcus, against the machine, against everything I helped build. He paused. His hand was still on the drive, still touching it, still connected to the evidence that would destroy him as completely as it would destroy Marcus. But I want something in exchange, something only you can give me. What? He looked at the notebook, then at me. Your forgiveness, he said. Not for me. I don't deserve it, I know that, I'll always know that, but for my father, Reginald Vance, the embezzler, the fraud, the man who taught me to cheat and then left me to face the consequences. His hand tightened on the USB. He's in prison, 8 years, the conviction you predicted, the one Dimitri threatened me with. He looked down. He's dying. Cancer. Real cancer, not the manufactured kind. 3 months, maybe less. He's alone. Scared. Forgotten by everyone except the creditors who keep calling, the lawyers who keep billing, the son who keeps failing to visit because he can't face what his father made him. He looked up, tears ran down his face, not performative, not calculated, just tears. The tears of a man who had used up every other emotion and found them insufficient. I can't save him, Julian said. I can't undo what he did, what I did, but I can give him this. I can give him the knowledge that his son finally chose truth, finally became something other than a cog. Finally, he stopped, breathed, finally earned a place on the ledger, not as a debtor, as a witness, as someone who refused. He pushed the USB all the way to me, released it, let his hand fall to the table. The tremor was visible now, uncontrolled. The shaking of a man who had finally stopped performing cooperation and was discovering what it cost to be real. Give my father my name, Ethan. Put it on the website. Let him see it before he dies. Let him know that Julian Vance, the tutor with the shaking hand, the liar, the betrayer, finally chose something else. I picked up the USB, slipped it into my pocket. Do better than that, I said. Julian looked up, hope and fear mixed in his eyes, the particular cocktail of someone who had offered everything and was waiting to discover if it was enough. Give him the notebook, I said, the complete ledger. Every entry, every name, every choice, he can read it in his cell. He can see what his son became, not the embezzler, not the fraud, the witness, the man who refused. I stood, walked around the table, stood beside Julian. He didn't look up. I placed my hand on his shoulder, the same gesture my mother had used, the keeper of ashes, the woman with no name, the chain of touch that connected everyone the machine had tried to separate. Your name is already on the list, Julian, I said. It always was, not because you earned it, not because you paid your debt, but because the ledger isn't about punishment. It's about memory, about refusing to let the machine decide who matters and who doesn't. I squeezed his shoulder. Your father will read your name, he will know, and he will die knowing that his son, his broken, shaking, terrified son, finally became something the machine couldn't erase. I walked away, didn't look back, but I heard him, the coffee cup rattling in its saucer, the breath catching in his throat, the particular silence of a man who had finally been seen. I found my mother at the apartment. She sat on her mattress, the laptop open, the website glowing. The chorus had grown overnight, hundreds of new names, thousands. The server had crashed 3 times. The librarian had expanded it each time, adding capacity, adding redundancy, adding the particular architecture of memory that no single attack could destroy. Julian, she asked. I handed her the USB. She plugged it in. We watched together as the files opened, documents, emails, photographs, the complete chain of Marcus's authority, his signature on orders, his approval for transfers, his handwriting on the document that erased Mrs. Park's daughter. My mother scrolled through them, silent. Her face didn't change. She had learned in the White Room to perform neutrality, to hide reaction, to become invisible even to herself, but her hand found mine, squeezed hard. Marcus, she whispered. Yes, boy who came to your room, the one who lowered his hand, the one who chose. Yes, she closed the laptop, looked at me. What will you do? I opened my notebook, wrote. Entry 24, Julian Vance, the tutor, the betrayer, the witness. He chose truth, he chose memory. He chose to be seen. His name is on the ledger. His father's name is on the ledger. The chain of touch continues. I closed the notebook. Give Marcus a choice, I said. The same choice Julian had, the same choice Evelyn had, the same choice everyone who encounters the machine must make. Choice. I walked to the window, looked out at the grey city, the cracks in the clouds, the light that was finally breaking through. To stop, I said, to confess, to become part of the chorus instead of the machine. I paused, or to keep going, to keep erasing, to keep being the architect, and to face what happens when the ledger finally balances. I turned. Either way, the machine ends, not because I destroy it, but because everyone who feeds it finally stops, because the cogs refuse to turn, because the chorus is louder than the engine. My mother stood, walked to me, touched my face, the same rough palm, the same warmth. Same touch that had survived 15 years of separation and was still learning how to be real. Not a boy anymore, she said. I died at 26. I was reborn at 16, and whatever age I need to be. She smiled, the smile from the photograph, the smile from the cottage, the smile that had survived everything. Then be the age that finishes this, she said. Not with a knife, not with a gun, not with the machine's tools, with your tools, your voice, your ledger, your chorus. She kissed my forehead. Find Marcus, Ethan, give him the choice, and then let him choose. I found Marcus where I expected, not at a facility, not at a meeting, at the church, same pew, same posture, same emptiness in his face that had been there before, but different now. The gun was gone, the cross was in his hands, he held it like a child holds a blanket, like a drowning man holds a rope, like someone who had finally found something solid in a world of shifting lies. Julian spoke to you, he said, not a question. He gave me evidence. Marcus nodded, slow, resigned. I know, I authorized the transfer, the disposal, Mrs. Park's daughter. He looked at the cross. I told myself it was necessary, that she was a threat, that the machine needed protection, that I was protecting. He laughed. What was I protecting, Ethan? A system that eats children, that erases mothers, that turns brothers into killers and sons into architects. He looked at me. I became what I was raised to be. What Mother Clarissa wanted, what the machine needed, I thought. I thought I could control it, make it better, less cruel, Maury. He stopped, human, yes. I sat beside him, not close, not far, the distance between two people who had tried to kill each other and were now trying to understand what came after. You can't, I said. The machine doesn't become human. Humans become the machine. That's how it works. That's how it survives. By convincing us that we can change it from the inside, that our cruelty is kindness, that our erasure is care, that our silence is protection. I opened my notebook, found the page where I had first written his name, not Marcus, not stepbrother, not killer, just entry 3, Marcus, golden boy, purchased grades, the knife at 11:47, showed him, he read it, his face didn't change. Remember that night, he said, the kitchen, the wine, the knife, he looked at his hands. I was drunk, but not drunk enough. I knew what I was doing. I wanted to erase you, to make you disappear, to stop being compared to you, to stop feeling. Less, he closed his eyes, and now I am less than you, less than her, less than the furniture I tried to break, because you became something, and I became. This, he held up the cross, small, wooden, hollow. Machine made me its architect, he said. And I accepted, I signed, I ordered, I erased. Became everything I hated about Mother, everything I feared about myself. He looked at me. How do I stop, Ethan? How do I become something else, when the machine is all I know, when cruelty is the only language I speak? When every choice I make is poisoned by everything I was taught? I took the notebook back, closed it, held it in my hands. You choose, I said. Choose what? To stop, to confess, to add your voice to the chorus. To let the ledger record not just your crimes, but your refusal. I paused, or you keep going, you keep erasing, you keep being the machine, and you face what happens when the chorus finally sings loud enough to drown you out. Marcus looked at the cross, then at me, then at the empty church around us, the simple altar, the wooden beams, the light filtering through windows that had seen centuries of people choosing, refusing, becoming. I can't sing, he said. Yes, you can. Don't know the words. Teach you. He looked at me, really looked. For the first time since we were children, since before the stepmother, before the machine, before the transformation of two boys into killer and killed, architect and ledger, monster and ghost. Why? He asked. Because you lowered your hand, I said. In my doorway at 11:47 p.m. You could have killed me. You didn't. That choice, that one choice is in the ledger. It always was. It always will be. No matter what came after. I stood, held out my hand. Chorus is waiting, Marcus. The ledger is open. The machine is ending. Not because I destroyed it, but because everyone who fed it is finally stopping. He looked at my hand, longer than he had looked at the cross, longer than he had looked at the knife, all those years ago in the kitchen, with the clock ticking and the world going red. Then he took it. His hand was cold, dry, shaking, but it was human, and it was choosing. We walked out of the church together, into the grey afternoon, into the cracks of light, into the chorus that was still singing. I opened my notebook, wrote, entry 25, Marcus Whitfield, golden boy, architect, killer, brother. He chose not gold, not truth, just stopping, just being human. His name is on the ledger. His voice is in the chorus. The machine has lost another cog. I closed the notebook. Marcus walked beside me, not ahead. Not behind, beside, two boys who had been enemies, who had tried to erase each other, who were now walking towards something else, something the machine couldn't copy, couldn't replace, couldn't erase, the stubborn, beautiful, fragile fact of choosing, of refusing, of being seen. Chapter 15. The tribunal met in a converted school gymnasium in a district of Seoul that had no name worth remembering. Folding chairs, fluorescent lights. A basketball hoop still hanging from the ceiling, its net frayed, its presence a reminder that this room had once held children who played without knowing that such rooms could also hold justice. I sat in the front row, my mother beside me, Evelyn on her other side, close enough to touch, far enough that neither of them had to decide if they would. Marcus sat in the defendant's chair. No restraints, no guards. Just a man in a simple suit, his hands folded, his voice steady as he spoke the last of his confessions. I authorized the transfer of Park Sunmai to Phase 4 in 2019. I signed the order for her disposal in 2020. I approved the payment to the facility director. I received confirmation of completion. He paused, looked at Mrs. Park, sitting 3 rows back, her hands wrapped around a stone she had carried from Busan. I erased your daughter, not because she was a threat. Because she was inconvenient. Because the machine taught me that inconvenience was the only sin. Park didn't react. She had learned, like my mother, like Evelyn, like all of them, that reaction was a luxury the machine didn't permit. She just held her stone and listened. Marcus continued, name after name, order after order, signature after signature, the ledger of his crimes, spoken aloud, recorded, made real in a way that documents and photographs could not. When he finished, the room was silent, not the silence of shock, the silence of a chorus that had finally been heard. Evelyn stood. She walked to the witness stand with the careful steps of a woman who had spent 15 years in rooms with white walls and had only recently learned that the world had color. She raised her hand. She didn't wait to be sworn in. I am the architect, she said, her voice carried, not loud, certain. The certainty of someone who had built a machine and was now prepared to dismantle it bolt by bolt. I designed Phase 2. I expanded Phase 3. I franchised the system across 12 countries. I recruited Clarissa Whitfield. I trained her. I approved her methods. I took a percentage of every payment, every transfer, every disposal. She looked at my mother. I did this, she said, because I lost my child, because I believed the machine could help me find her. Because I blamed my sister for surviving when my daughter did not, because I was broken and the machine offered me power instead of healing. She turned to the tribunal. I know where the bodies are buried. I know which facilities hold living prisoners and which hold only memories. I know the shell companies, the bank accounts, the signatures of every family who paid for silence. She paused. I will give you everything. But first, she stopped. Her hands gripped the railing of the witness stand, white-knuckled. Trembling, first I want to see my daughter. The tribunal adjourned for 3 hours. During that time, Sujin worked. The librarian provided records. The master ledger, which Evelyn had surrendered, yielded its final secret. Isabel Vance, Phase 4, Colorado. Transferred 1992, renamed 1995, married 2010, 2 children. A life built on the erasure of another. Sujin made the call. A woman answered. Middle-aged, cautious. She had been told her biological mother died in childbirth, told her father was unknown, told the family who raised her were her real family, her only family, her eternal debt. Sujin didn't explain over the phone. She sent a photograph. Evelyn young, standing in front of a university. Evelyn older, in the attic with the toys. Evelyn now in the tribunal room, gripping the railing. And a note, your mother is alive. She built a machine that hurt many people, including you. She wants to see you, not to claim you, not to demand, just to see. The choice is yours. Woman, Isabel, or whatever name she used now, didn't respond for an hour. Then, I need time. Sujin wrote back, you have all the time the world can give. The ledger waits. When the tribunal reconvened, Evelyn spoke for 6 hours. She named names. She provided addresses. She drew maps in the air with her finger, tracing the architecture of erasure across continents, through decades, into the present moment where the machine still hummed in facilities that hadn't yet been notified of her betrayal. The tribunal recorded everything. The chorus grew. Julian testified next, then Mrs. Patterson, then Kim Yi-sun, appearing by video from a location he didn't disclose, then Lee Min-jae, her stone visible on the table before her. Then my father, gaunt, sober, speaking from a cell where he awaited his own charges, his own judgment, his own attempt to balance a ledger that had tilted too far for too long. Then my mother, she stood without notes. She spoke of the white room, the restraints, the performances of cooperation, the years of waiting, the escape that wasn't escape, the recapture, the second escape, the real one, the walk out of the facility that should have been impossible. She spoke of me, of the boy she had left behind, of the man he had become, of the ledger he carried, of the chorus he built. When she finished, she didn't sit. She turned to Evelyn. She walked to her. She stood before the witness stand, and she said, I forgive you. 3 words, small, enormous, the weight of 15 years of 2 sisters, of a machine that had tried to turn them against each other and failed. Evelyn didn't respond. She couldn't. She just wept. The tears of a woman who had built a fortress and discovered that the only thing she had imprisoned was herself. Isabel arrived on the 3rd day of the tribunal. She came alone. No husband. No children. Just a woman in her mid-30s with sharp features and eyes that cut through the lens, standing in the doorway of the gymnasium looking for a mother she had never known. Evelyn saw her first. She stood, she walked, slowly, each step an eternity, each step a choice. They met in the center of the room. Between the folding chairs, under the basketball hoop, the frayed net swaying in a draft from the open door, Evelyn reached out. Isabel didn't move. May I? Evelyn asked. Isabel nodded, once, small, final. Evelyn touched her daughter's face, the same gesture my mother had used on me, the same rough palm, the same warmth, the same 15 years of separation compressed into a single point of contact. I built a machine to find you, Evelyn whispered. I know. I hurt people, your aunt, your cousin, thousands of others. I know. I don't deserve. Stop. Isabel's voice was steady, not cruel, not kind, just steady. I didn't come to forgive you. I don't know if I can. I don't know if I ever will. Came because she paused, because I read the ledger, the website, the chorus. I saw my name. I saw that someone remembered, that someone had spent 30 years trying to find me, even if that someone was broken, even if that someone built a machine that destroyed lives. The fact of being remembered, her voice cracked. That matters, that counts, that stays. She stepped back. Evelyn's hand fell to her side. Have children, Isabel said. A husband, a life. It's not the life I would have chosen. The life you would have chosen for me, but it's mine, and I'm not giving it up, not for you, not for the ledger, not for anything. Evelyn nodded. I don't want you to. I know. Isabel turned, walked to the door, paused. But I'll come back, not tomorrow, not next month, maybe not for years, but I'll come back because the ledger says I'm remembered. And because, she looked over her shoulder, because my children deserve to know their grandmother, even if she's a monster, even if she's broken. Even if she's still learning how to be human. She walked out. Evelyn stood in the center of the room, alone, but not erased, not disappeared. Remembered the tribunal issued its findings on the 7th day. The machine was declared a crime against humanity. The facilities were ordered closed. The patients, those who could be found, were freed. The families, those who could be identified, were notified. The staff, those who participated, were charged. The architects, old and new, were sentenced. Evelyn received life imprisonment, but she received it in a facility with windows, with visitors, with the possibility of seeing Isabel again. Marcus received 20 years. He accepted without appeal. My father received 15. He wept when he heard my mother's testimony. My stepmother, Clarissa, was arrested in her cell where she had been awaiting trial for her own crimes. Additional charges, deeper crimes. Evidence that Evelyn provided that the master ledger confirmed, that the chorus had suspected but could not prove she would never leave prison. The machine she served would outlast her by decades, but it would not outlast the ledger. I gave the notebook to the tribunal, not as evidence, as monument. They placed it in a glass case in the lobby of the gymnasium. The original, water-stained, worn open to entry one. The ledger of debts, every cruelty, every lie, every drop of blood. I remember all of it. Visitors came, they read, they added their names. The chorus grew, the website grew, the ledger grew heavier, realer, more impossible to erase my mother, and I moved to the cottage, not immediately, not easily, but eventually. We rebuilt the garden, we fed the cat, we learned each other's habits. She woke early, I wrote late, we met in the kitchen at dawn. She made tea, I made toast. We didn't speak much, we didn't need to. The silence was enough, the presence was enough. The fact of being alive together in a world that had tried to erase us both, that was enough. Marcus wrote from prison, not often, once a month, short letters. He had learned to write in the machine, now he was learning again. Chorus sings here too, he wrote once. Not loudly, not publicly, but in the yard, in the workshops, in the particular solidarity of people who have been broken and are learning to be something else. I didn't write back, not because I couldn't forgive him. Because the ledger didn't require response, it only required memory, and he was remembered. Evelyn died in her 3rd year of imprisonment, not violently, not dramatically. She simply stopped. The doctors said heart failure. I think she stopped because she had finally seen Isabel. 3 visits, short, awkward, real. After the 3rd, she wrote me a letter, 1 line. The ledger is balanced. I added her name to the website, not as architect, as witness, as mother. As someone who had finally chosen. I am 26 now, the age I died. The age I was reborn. I live in the cottage. I write in a new notebook. The entries are different now, not debts, not crimes, just moments. My mother laughing at a joke I made, the cat catching a mouse. A letter from Isabel, forwarded by Sue Jin, saying her children are learning about the ledger in school. A photograph from Julian, his father's grave, a stone placed on the headstone, the particular light of morning through the kitchen window. Write them all because the ledger was never really about revenge. It was about refusing to let the machine decide what mattered, about claiming the right to remember, to witness, to be seen. The last entry. Entry 1000. Today I am 26. Today I am alive. Today I sat in the garden and watched my mother tend tomatoes and the cat sleep in the sun and the clouds move across a sky that has finally learned to hold color. The machine is gone. The chorus remains. The ledger grows, not heavier, lighter. With each name added, each voice raised, each ghost who refuses to disappear. I died once. I was reborn. I became the ledger. And now finally I am just Ethan, son of Alina, nephew of Evelyn, brother of Marcus, friend of Julian, keeper of stones, writer of entries, human being, alive. Close the notebook. I walk to the garden. My mother looks up, smiles, the smile from the photograph, the smile that survived everything. Tick-tock, she says. I laugh. Anymore, she tilts her head. What then? I sit beside her. I pick up a stone, grey, ordinary, the kind you find on any path. I drop it. It hits the earth with a sound between a click and a thud. Now, I say, just now. The website still exists. The names still grow. Every year on March 15th, the date of my mother's escape, the date of Evelyn's recapture, the date that became something else, the chorus gathers. In Seoul, in Busan, in cities that have no name worth remembering, they bring stones, they drop them. They make noise, they refuse to be silent. And in the center, in the place where the noise is loudest, a boy, now a man, stands with a notebook. Writing, remembering, witnessing. The machine tried to erase him. It failed. The ledger tried to balance him. It succeeded. Not in debt, not in revenge. In the stubborn, beautiful, impossible fact of being alive, of being seen, of being human. Tick-tock, the clock still ticks, but the boy is still here, still writing, still singing, still now. Thank you for watching.